unplanned activities across the country. Also have reaction as well as looking at the impact, with Busa urging caution as saying that the Kusatu strike threatens economic stability. In court, quite a number of court cases today. The case against 5 men accused of murdering the Bafana Bafana captain, Senzo Mehiwa, is back at the High Court in Pretoria. It comes after a 2-week recess, and during the last court appearance, the third ballistic expert, being Captain Malise Lantini, continued under cross-examination, and he's expected to return to the stand this morning. The trial in the Western Cape, the trial of alleged gang bosses Mark Liefman and Jerome Boyson's, also expected to kick off in the High Court, and they are facing a number of charges. There are about 14 co-accused in that matter, and also on trial is the alleged gang boss Nafis Modak. He faces a string of charges, including the murder of top cop Carl Kania, who was gunned down outside his house, and he is one of the 15 accused in the dock. And just lastly, in Limpopo, 2 prominent court cases expected to resume in 2 separate courts, and it being the murder trial of the 3 Radzumo siblings accused of killing 2 SAMU leaders, and that case is suspected to be related to the VBS investment, and 2 people accused in gang-related killings also expected to appear at the Tohoyando Magistrates Court. So some of those stories that we'll be focusing on throughout the morning.
All right, thank you for that. And it's going to be a busy day for our newsroom. And of course, you can catch up with all the updates from Anne every 30 minutes throughout the morning here on SAFM, but also catch all those stories and the others that Anne just simply could not highlight for you within the last few minutes. But you can catch all of them across all our platforms here on SABC News as well as on SAFM throughout the day.
Thulasizwe Simelane on SAFM.
Let's get you up and going with your weather this morning and give you the 2 warnings that I do have in as far as the weather is concerned. One of them is a yellow level 1 warning for damaging winds leading to difficulty in navigation at sea. That is expected between Cape Point and Cape Agulhas, spreading to Plettenberg Bay in the evening. There's also a fire danger warning. It says extremely high fire danger conditions are expected in places over the David Kruiper District Municipality in the Northern Cape, as well as the lowvelds of both Mpumalanga and Limpopo. The rest of your weather looks like this then. Pretoria is fine in the morning, otherwise partly cloudy with a minimum of 11 and a maximum of 29. Johannesburg is fine in the morning, otherwise partly cloudy, minimum 9 and a maximum of 28. Mbombela fine, becoming partly cloudy by afternoon, 9 to 32. Polokwane fine, 9 to 30. Mahikeng is fine at first, otherwise partly cloudy. It's a minimum of 10 and a maximum of 30. Bloemfontein is fine at first, otherwise partly cloudy, 10 to 28. Kimberley is partly cloudy with a minimum of 10 and a maximum of 29. Cape Town is partly cloudy, becoming fine from the afternoon. The wind will be light to moderate southerly to southeasterly. It's a minimum of 17 and a maximum of 30 in Cape Town. Gqeberha is cloudy to partly cloudy with isolated light showers and rain. The wind is light to moderate southerly, becoming moderate to fresh easterly in the afternoon with a minimum of 15 and a maximum of 20. East London is cloudy with scattered showers and rain. The wind is moderate southwesterly, becoming southeasterly in the afternoon, but easterly in the evening. It's a minimum of 16 and a maximum of 20. Durban is fine, becoming cloudy in the afternoon with isolated showers and rain. The wind will be moderate to fresh southwesterly to southerly, reaching strong at times. It's a minimum of 18 and a maximum of 23. And finally, Pietermaritzburg is fine, becoming cloudy from the late morning with isolated showers and rain, with a minimum of 14 and a maximum of 25.
For credible and comprehensive coverage of South Africa's fast-moving mining industry and the people shaping it, click through to Creamer Media's Mining Weekly. From policy and innovation to market-moving trends, Creamer Media's Mining Weekly keeps your finger on the resources pulse. For even deeper insight, subscribe to our New Look weekly magazine, out every Friday, together with engineering news. Creamer Media's Mining Weekly. Current, credible, comprehensive.
So why should I use We Buy Cars if I want to sell my vehicle?
Because We Buy Cars buys cars.
But will I get the right price?
Of course. We Buy Cars buys thousands of vehicles and knows exactly what every vehicle is worth. Their buyers deliver exceptional service and pay you immediately.
And how do I know what they'll pay for my vehicle?
It's easy. Visit webuycars.co.za or use the We Buy Cars app. Follow the simple steps and voila, you'll know your car's value in no time. We Buy Cars. Quick, easy, the best.
Worldview Update, bringing you closer to international or global news.
It marks a year since the attack that started the latest bout of conflict in the Middle East. Last year, on October 7, Hamas militants breached the barriers that separate Israel from Gaza and indiscriminately attacked both military targets and civilians, including residents of villages and towns and a music festival near the Gaza border. They killed over 1,200 people, the majority of whom were civilians, and took about 251 hostages. A year later, Israel has, in its retaliation, killed nearly 42,000 people, most of them Palestinian civilians. For more, I'm joined now on the line by Professor Andre Thomas Hausen, who is Professor Emeritus of International Law at UNISA. Good morning to you, Prof. I've got to thank you for your time, your own reflections, and how you believe the world should mark and remember this day.
Yes, good morning, listeners. I think, first of all, we have to remember that a large percentage of the world's population is still totally appalled, is totally frightened by the fact that the hostages have never been released, that all the dead in Gaza could have been spared, could have been avoided if the hostages had been released. And there are commemorations all over the world in all the big capital cities, virtually all the industrial nations, all the developed world is still standing with Israel. South Africa, yesterday in a joint prayer meeting at Regina Mundi in Soweto, very clearly through Mr. Lesoufi said that South Africa stands with Palestine. So it's standing with Palestine, with Iran, and with a small number of countries that follow the Shia extreme form of political Islam, and that is, of course, very worrying.
What should the world make, though, of the humanitarian catastrophe playing out in Gaza, the violations of humanitarian law that have been reported coming out of there?
Well, humanitarian law cannot write history. We know that only a few days after the attack of Russia against Ukraine, the International Court of Justice made a ruling, not just an interim ruling, not just a caution ruling, but a firm ruling that Russia should immediately withdraw all military forces from the sovereign country of Ukraine. And nobody in South Africa has remembered this. Nobody is decrying that this order, which was immediately made a judgment of the International Court of Justice, was completely ignored and continues to be ignored. And also nobody is remembering that about 1 million people are dead in Ukraine, not the questionable 40,000, because the 40,000 obviously include people that would have died in the normal course in the normal way of passing in a 2 to 3 million nation. Of course, people die every day, and they have to be discounted from the 40,000. But
are you saying some people died of natural causes, Prof? Is that what you're suggesting?
Obviously.
From the number that has been given as the casualty number out of Gaza,
no,
out of
obviously,
Israel's actions?
Obviously, it's the total number of people that there included natural causes, and obviously Hamas fighters who are in a war against Israel and are firing missiles daily onto civilian targets in Israel, they also have to be discounted. So we cannot really say with precision how many have died because
Prof,
of
I'm battling
conflict.
with this concept of people dying of natural causes and then being reported as casualties of a war.
Well, that has to be clarified by the so-called Hamas Ministry of Health. There is no more infrastructure left in Gaza. How are they actually counting people? How are they distinguishing who has died of a heart attack and who has died of disease and who has died of a bullet? So there is no statistic. There's no clear statistic. I think it doesn't matter because obviously a lot and much too many people have died in this war, like in other wars, as I just pointed out. 1 million dead people in Ukraine. And nobody holds a confessional prayer meeting for them. So we shouldn't get too excited. We should focus on how to solve this conflict because it can explode. It can become much worse. There are nuclear weapons in the Middle East, and they could throw the world into a catastrophe.
I don't think, Prof, it's a question of getting too excited more than it is a question of the world just being aghast at the scale of human suffering and death that has been wrought by that conflict in the Middle East. And I think you take it to the right point to talk about trying to reach a point of easing and backing away. I wish I could say from the edge, but we've pretty much fallen into the precipice in as far as that conflict is concerned. In your view, are we any closer to pulling back and sort of easing the temperature a little bit, or have the developments around Lebanon and Iran getting directly involved complicated the picture even further?
I don't see a turning point at this stage. Many scholars, many really intelligent people believe that the Islamic Republic of Iran is about to end, just like the Soviet Union ended by disintegrating inside. There were signs of it with the with several very suspicious deaths of leaders, and obviously the massive retaliation of that regime against its own people, against women. When one young woman was tortured to death in jail because her head scarf had been worn a little bit disorderly. So there are huge pressures in Iran. The moment Iran would become a normal country, a secular state, I'm sure the tensions would diffuse. Hezbollah in Lebanon is just an extension of the Islamic Revolution in Iran, and Hamas has decided to join that group, much to the worry and rejection of all the neighboring countries around it.
What is your basis of believing that Iran is about to disintegrate like the Soviet Union?
Well, I don't think we have the time to go into details, but there are very, very many indications. There are also opinion polls which were conducted from outside Iran, which show that the dissent in Iran is massive. The people no longer want to live in a religion, in a country that has made a state religion the total ideology over the lives of millions who are not allowed to be free, who are not allowed to dance, who are not allowed to eat.
A theocratic state, how does that differ from an insistence that Israel is a quote-unquote Jewish state, though?
That's a very good argument. I have a few years ago, I was the lead speaker at the League of Arab Nations, and I proposed exactly that the solution to the Gaza-Israel conflict would be for Israel to become a secular state.
All right, Prof.
Where religious freedoms are guaranteed.
All right, I've got to thank you for your time. That's Professor Andre Thomas Hausen, who is a Professor Emeritus of International Law at UNISA, concluding our International Focus feature this morning. At 6:30, let's check in with N. Musa with the latest news headlines.
Good morning. Thanks to us. In the headlines, 3 suspects are expected to appear in court today in connection with various crimes in Thulasizwe in the Eastern Cape. The Thulasizwe party has called off a planned picket outside the venue at which the Judicial Service Commission will hold its interviews to fill vacancies in various courts in the country. And COSATU says it's ready for its nationwide strike against unemployment today. The action will coincide with World Day for Decent Work. I'll have details on these and other stories at 7.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Looks like something's happened inside Galuli's interchange. If you're coming in from the East Ekurhuleni side, there's just a problem with the backlog of traffic on both the N12 and the R24 routes into Galuli's. It's an early delay there, and as I can say, looking at our system, it appears that as you sort of come into that flyover off the N12 onto the N3 for a turn up towards Linksfield, that's potentially where the problem is. Major crash in Pretoria. It's on WFN Como between Attridgeville and Pretoria West, so just by Manhattan Flats. You'll be stuck in a bit of traffic and possibly a diversion around that as well. Durban, a note about windy conditions. Gusts of over 80 kilometres an hour already. It's in the forecast today for strong winds across Durban, so take it easy in high-sided vehicles. Cape Town also windy enough out at the viaduct on the Huguenot Tunnel section to close the tunnel to high-sided vehicles. So if you're using the N1, you're driving a big truck in or out of Cape Town, you'll be finding yourself rerouted away from the tunnel and over Du Toit's Kloof Pass. So take it easy through there. And just watch for a crash on Ottery Road at the M5 highway. That's a busy route. That's likely to back things up. And some sand on Baden-Powell this morning between Khayelitsha and Muizenberg. To take it easy through those various patches of sand. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
This is SAFM Sports with Tumi Nkgapele.
Good morning once again. Tumi standing in for Zaikan. Tumi, the happy people, I'm told, are happy to the power of 3.
Absolutely, they're very happy after winning the MTN 8 final, and obviously a lot of controversy around that win, with a lot of people feeling that perhaps that second goal was not supposed to be a second goal for Pirates or allowed. However, the question is, if that goal was not allowed, Pirates probably would have still won, right? Because of that goal.
I don't want to wade into those waters.
Yeah, no, let's not wade into that. But talking about Pirates, a great weekend, obviously, for Pirates, even more so for Coach Jose Rivero, who won a remarkable 5th trophy in 3 seasons. He's also the first Buccaneer coach to achieve a 100% win rate in a single calendar month. And now with the focus set to be on the Betway Premiership, here's the Spanish mentor on their chase.
We want to... We really commit with the fact that we want to fight for the league as well. We want to rise the level in that competition. We want to increase the level of the league itself, giving a proper competition to whichever contender wants to fight for the league as well. But fight for the league, it goes without saying, but it's not about talking here, myself saying, no, we want to fight for the league. It's something that we need to show week in, week out, wherever we go.
Well, still staying with football, for the first time in 4 years, Amajita have lifted the COSAFA Under-20 Championship, finishing the tournament unbeaten and keeping a clean sheet in all 5 matches. South Africa beat Zambia 2-0 in the final with goals from Chandre Campbell and tournament top goal scorer Lee Ashen. Now, the 2 teams have also qualified for the AFCON Under-20, which will be held next year. Elsewhere, Tottenham Hotspur manager Ange Postecoglou has called his side's collapse against Brighton in the Premier League probably the worst defeat since he's been at the club. Spurs were 2-0 up after 37 minutes and headed for their 6th successive win in all competitions, but conceded 3 times in the second half as Brighton took the 3 points. Meanwhile, Manchester United played to a goalless draw against Aston Villa. Chelsea settled for spoils with Nottingham Forest in a 1-all-goal affair. Moving on to cricket, Proteas men's ODI captain Themba Bavuma has been ruled out of the 3rd ODI against Ireland due to a soft tissue injury on his left elbow. The 34-year-old sustained the injury during the 2nd ODI on Friday. Bavuma will then return home with the rest of the squad tomorrow and will consult a specialist. Rassie van der Dussen will captain the team for the final match of that series today, and it gets underway around 4 p.m. Meanwhile, Proteas women head into their 2nd Women's T20 World Cup match against England today, full of confidence after their commanding 10-wicket win over the West Indies in their opening fixture. Proteas woman spinner Nonkululeko Komlaba has attributed their remarkable start to the team's strong mentality.
I think for us now, we in it to win it. I mean, we failed semi-finals a couple of times, and we failed at the finals, and now it's either we win it or not. So that's the mentality of the team now. We're just in it to win it. Yeah.
In tennis, world number 6 Coco Gauff beat Karolina Muchova to become the first American to win the China Open since Serena Williams back in 2013. At 20 years old, she's also the tournament's youngest champion in 14 years. She now moves on to the Wuhan Open, which starts today. With that said, it's a wrap from my side for now. I have more in the next hour.
There's sponsoring a news feature. Then there's helping your clients make the news. Search Standard Bank Business and Commercial Banking to see how far they can take your business.
The Business Update on SAFM.
And let's say good morning to Ndauling Lechela. Good morning to you, Ndauling. Did you have a good weekend?
Morning, Thulas. I had a lovely weekend. My voice is still okay, so everything's good.
For this weekend, you kept it. Darling, let's start in the United States. You're watching the labor market there, and it's got some offshoots that are promising.
That's right, Tula. So this print was, widely watched because it'll give clues to what the Fed could do in November and in December. So the job market has added 254,000 jobs last month. This is from growth of 159,000 in August and is above analyst expectations of 150,000. The September print has calmed analyst concerns about a recession and supports the Fed's comments around a soft landing. Now, restaurants and bars led job creation for the month, with the hospitality industry adding 69,000 positions after averaging just 14,000 over the previous 12 months. Healthcare, a consistent leader in job growth, contributed 45,000 jobs, while government grew by 31,000. Strength in job creation spilled over to wages as average hourly earnings increased 0.4% on the month and were up 4% from a year ago. Both figures were ahead of respective estimates for gains of 0.3% and 3.8%. In the meantime, unemployment edged lower, with the jobless rate slipping 0.1 percentage points to 4.1%. The broader measure of unemployment, which accounts for discouraged workers and those in part-time jobs due to economic necessity, declined to 7.7%. Meanwhile, the labor force participation rate, representing proportion of the workforce either employed or actively seeking employment, remained unchanged at 62.7%. Now, following this print, traders have lowered their rate reduction expectations, now pegging in 225 basis points cuts in November and December.
And back here at home, why is the South African Reserve Bank imposing fines on HSBC and Bidvest Bank?
So the SARB is, slapping both HSBC and Bidvest Bank on the risk for non-compliance. Both banks have been fined millions for not complying with certain elements of the Financial Intelligence Centre Act, starting with HSBC, the British financial institution that's in the process of selling its local assets, has been hit with administrative sanctions due to its failure to comply with certain provisions of the FIC Act, and the penalty consists of 3 cautions and a financial penalty totaling 9.5 million rand, of which 4 million rand is conditionally suspended for a period of 36 months as from the 10th of June. Bidvest Bank also finding itself in hot water for the same reasons, as it also failed to comply with certain FIC Act provisions. This has resulted in a financial penalty of 5 million rand, of which 2.5 million is conditionally suspended for a period of 12 months. It's quite interesting that Bidvest Bank is also up for sale, as Bidvest makes an effort to divest from financial services. Now, this move comes just a week after the Reserve Bank imposed penalties on Old Mutual for non-compliance issues as well. We're seeing the SARB's Prudential Authority really cracking the whip on big banks in its push to get the country off the Financial Action Task Force's grey list.
All right, finally, Ndauling, a recap of the markets, starting with Asia, the US, as well as the JSE closing on Friday.
Now let's recap what happened in the US. That stock market surged on Friday after a surprisingly strong jobs report alleviated concerns about the economy's health, boosting investor confidence. The Nasdaq leading the gains there, closing 1.2% higher. The local market, however, not jumping on the bandwagon, with stocks closing lower. The all-share losing 0.15%, fueled by losses in the industrial 25 index, which fell 0.55%. The rand, in the meantime, trading in a tight range, sitting just below 17.50 to the dollar. Over in Asia, markets in the green, building on Wall Street's Friday gains as robust U.S. jobs data lifted economic optimism. But the mood was tempered by Middle East tensions and fading hopes for sharp interest rate cuts.
All right, thank you. That's Ndauling Lechela. She's back just after 7:30 with the second of her 3 updates for you in all news to do with the economy, business and the markets here on The Morning Brief.
There's listening to the news. Then there's making the news. Grow your business into the next big thing with Standard Bank Business and Commercial Banking. When you choose Standard Bank Business and Commercial Banking, you get access to our business solar loans. Accessing our business solar loans means you get connected to the right supplier for your business and the most feasible tailor-made financing solution. And that financing solution means 8,760 hours of uninterrupted power for your business, sourced directly from the African sun. You see, there's going green. Then there's going green with us. Search Standard Bank Business and Commercial Banking. Standard Bank is an authorized FSP and registered credit provider. T's and C's apply.
Call Thulasizwe now. 086 000 2032.
All right, let's take some of your calls this morning. Let's start with Eunice in Joburg. Good morning to you, Eunice. You want to talk to me about the conversation I had with Professor Thomas Hausen?
Yes, Thulasizwe, I find it very strange that this person can have airtime quite often as an analyst on national radio when really much of what he says can be contested here. I mean, for him to come onto the airwaves and say, just release the hostages and the story is over, and yet not talking of, for example, of the thousands and thousands of Palestinians who are languishing in Israeli prisons, some for decades. Only after October 7th, let alone the Gaza Strip, from the West Bank, there are over 10,000 Palestinians who are incarcerated from the West Bank. Now, I mean, for him to say also that of the 42,000 people, some died of natural causes, so that doesn't make the whole listing. So really, he claims to be a professor. By the way, did you know that he was an advisor to the Renamo movement in Mozambique during the height of the Mozambican struggle?
I did not know that. How do you know that?
You need to ask him that question. So having this Islamophobic propagandists on the air, sure, I don't think it makes for a decent conversation. I mean, when you have an analyst, if that analyst can put facts on the table there, for example, he doesn't talk of Israel having violated over 50 UN resolutions, and there is the criteria. If they can implement those UN resolutions, surely you can have a peaceful outcome there. He doesn't talk of the siege of Gaza for 17 years, where it's the biggest. The UN itself said that it's the biggest open-air prison in the world.
Right.
And those people have been landlocked. So I think SAFM should reconsider having people like this there to give one side of the story there. I mean, and without any fact on the table, I don't think it makes for good radio television.
All right, I hear you, Eunice. I've got to thank you for that input.
Thanks.
That's Eunice in Joburg talking to me about that interview I had earlier on with Professor Thomas Hausen. In fact, on the same theme, Irfan wants to come in as well. Irfan, good morning. You are calling from Cape Town. You also want to reflect on the conversation with Professor Thomas Hausen.
Good morning, Thulas. Yes, I feel exactly the same way as Eunice. He was completely biased, and this thing of that he's mentioning is yes, as the 7th is come as a year, but Israel has been doing this for many, many years. He was completely biased, and no guessing as who his alliance is with.
What do you say to the proposal that says we should be willing to hear the varied perspectives on this? The view that says a lot of the voices that dominate in commentary, especially given South Africa's positioning and many in civil society in South Africa and their positioning in as far as the issues in the Middle East are concerned, it is worthwhile to also engage views that you don't necessarily agree with?
No, you see, you should get these facts right. And I mean, you should hear both sides of the story. He was just completely biased.
All right, I hear you. Thank you for that, Irfan, in Cape Town, weighing in on that conversation we heard earlier on. In fact, let's take a few of your voice notes and hear what you've had to say on this issue and others this morning.
Good morning, Thulasizwe. This is Caroline from Cape Town. I start by condemning in no uncertain terms the terror attacks on innocent Israelis on the 7th of October. But your guest has completely underplayed and been very dismissive of the disproportionate violence wreaked on innocent civilians in Gaza as a result by Israeli forces, whose commanders have turned a blind eye to excesses, have even encouraged killing of children, killing of journalists, killing of aid workers, deliberate blocking of humanitarian aid, allowing hunger and disease to spread and kill more people, turning a blind eye to settler atrocities, to settlers pulling food off trucks of humanitarian aid, going to feed starving people. All of this has been done in the name of the Israeli Defense Force, in the name of attacking individual terrorists in Hamas. But we know that they actually have the capacity to take out individual people when they want to. So why is there so-called collateral damage for hundreds of people, of innocent children and women and men who are not Hamas fighters killed for every Hamas fighter who is killed? Why? It is a deliberate, racist and even genocidal, you can say, policy to take out as many civilians as possible while you're taking out the Hamas fighters.
Yeah, in fact, Caroline, the point you make is a point that has been made. I think I was watching Mehdi Hassan in a debate about this particular issue, making that point that you are making, that the argument from the side of Israel is that it is Hamas that is endangering civilians by hiding its military infrastructure behind civilians and under Gaza and other areas. Mehdi Hassan was making the point that you are making, Caroline, that Israel has shown that it is capable of targeting pinpointedly those that it wants to take out. And if it wanted to take out the leadership of Hamas, and as they've shown in the last 2 months, including the killing of Ismail Haniyeh, they could have done exactly that. That debate about proportionality, to say, yes, there was an attack, and during the attack on Israel, war crimes, acts of war crimes were committed, hostages were taken, but does that justify the response? And is it proportionate and in line with international humanitarian law? So it's a point that I've heard before being made, Caroline.
Put a spring in your step with the Espresso Morning Show.
That's right. Join us for fresh ideas, blooming trends, and vibrant tunes that are sure to brighten your day.
Discover the best ways to enjoy the season's beauty, from garden tips to spring fashion.
Come on now. Plus, get inspired with lively interviews and my favorite, the latest in entertainment.
Basically, start your mornings right with us. That's weekdays from 6 to 9 a.m. only on S3.
The world's best football league makes its return to S3. Will Arsenal finally win their first title since 2004? Or will Man City continue their dominance of the league and win their 7th title under Pep Guardiola? Will the Dutchmen in Erik ten Hag and Arne Slot have something to say as Man United and Liverpool step in to contest for the title? But it's not only about winning the title. For some of the 20 teams, it's a chance to improve on their performances from last season. While for others, it's the battle to avoid relegation and stay in the top flight. Every team has a point to prove. This is not just football. This is a masterpiece being played out every weekend. Channel your best sport with the English Premier League. Saturdays at 3 p.m. on S3. Open up.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good morning. Heavy backlogs around the Centurion area at this stage. Now, we've got a crash on the N14. This is the Krugersdorp Highway between the R55 Pretoria West exit and the N1 Brockfontein interchange. If you're Pretoria bound, that's heavy. At the same time, there's also been a smash on the N1 South just after Brockfontein interchange down towards Old Johannesburg Road. So that traffic coming through from John Foster down towards Brockfontein for a turn down towards Midrand is backing up pretty quickly. A big crash between Attridgeville and Pretoria West on WFN Como. A lot of traffic being diverted and sitting in some delays around that one. Staying in Pretoria, there's big queues on the Maloto Road inbound towards Sefako Makato this morning. And Joburg, trying to avoid Galuli's interchange if you can. There's some very heavy early Monday queues coming up into a crash scene. So the collision is just north of Galuli, so it's having a major impact. The N3 North already very heavily backed all the way to Elan's interchange in Germiston. And behind that, the N12 and R24 routes coming in from Ekurhuleni that link on the flyover to get onto the N3 North. You're basically sort of linking right into that crash scene. So very heavy delays. N3 North, N12 and R24 westbound. Alternative local routes will be open and flowing at this stage, and they're the ones you should be on to avoid it. The N1, other side of town, heavy this morning from the N12 Potch Highway up through Eldos and Devlin. Looks like an obstruction inside the Deepcliff interchange causing that backlog. Durban, bit of pressure between Toti and Prospecton as you come up Tweeny Hill. That queue is heavier than it normally would be. Looks like lights are still down. St John's Avenue Bridge is already a backlog on the M7 going into that central Pinetown area. Cape Town, a vehicle overturning on Ottery Road at the M5, so watch for some delays there. And keep an eye out for sand patches on Baden-Powell at Khayelitsha and Coastal Park areas as well. Just drive carefully through the various sand patches. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
4 dynamic design duos reimagine and reinvent 4 apartments in a century-old building nestled in the vibrant suburb of Seapoint, Cape Town. Armed with creativity, determination, and a limited budget, the duos fight against the clock to transform this grand old dame into a contemporary masterpiece, all under the critical eyes of an expert judging panel. The winning duo will claim a grand prize of 300,000 Rand, with an additional 100,000 Rand going to the fan favorite team, as voted by viewers. Channel your inner wow with My Design Rules, Sundays at 7 p.m, only on S3. Open up. S3.
Hi, I'm Andrew, and I was recently diagnosed with myelodysplastic syndrome. Patients like myself go through a long and strenuous journey to get a stem cell transplant. I am grateful for the support I've received as I wait for the call that my donor has been found. This Sunflower Month, be a lifeline to patients like myself by registering to become a stem cell donor. You can save a life by registering at dkmsafrica.org.
CAF President Dr. Patrice Motsepe said, the exponential growth and global competitiveness of football in Africa has resulted in substantial interests from major African and international broadcasters in African football. SABC has been participating competitively in the CAF media rights bids. CAF welcomes them as partners, joining a number of CAF's media rights holders. We are committed to ensuring that CAF's competitions, including its broadcast products, are world-class.
This is Thulasizwe Simelane on the Morning Brief.
So one of the dominant stories you will hear today is about the JSC interviews that are taking place from today. The Umkhonto weSizwe Party has expressed its disappointment that the High Court in Johannesburg dismissed its application regarding a decision of the Judicial Services Commission. The party had sought a declaratory order that the decision of the JSC to deny its request to postpone interviews scheduled to begin today was unconstitutional. However, Judge Stuart Wilson found that the decision of the JSC was rational, as the body was bound by the order of the Western Cape Division of the High Court that temporarily interdicted the MK Party's parliamentary leader, Dr. John Hlophe, from participating in the JSC sittings. For more on this, I'm joined on the line by Bond Nyoka, who is an attorney and legal analyst. Good morning to you, Bond. I've got to thank you for your time. So, just your take on what was being argued by the lawyers for the MK Party regarding the decision to not postpone the interviews that are set to get underway today.
Thank you very much, Thulasizwe. It's not surprising. You know, in first year, one of the things that aspirant lawyers are taught in introduction to law regarding the hierarchy or principles of courts are that lower courts are bound by decisions of the higher courts until changed, and court decisions are binding on those that apply to them. This is expressed now in the Constitution in terms of Section 165, subsection 5 of the Constitution, that says court orders and decisions are binding on all those they apply to, including organs of state. So this is not surprising. It's simple law application as far as first year, and that was 1978 in my case. Secondly, the balance of convenience is the following. Those 54 candidates with 26 interviews prepared for months for this interview, 7-day interview. 3 million rands has been expended in preparation for this. That would have been wasteful expenditure just for one person to not to participate temporarily. He's not barred from participating, temporarily barred from participating. Maybe we'll start participating next year. So really the balance of convenience is in favor of going ahead with this. And he's not disadvantaged by not participating for 2 or so meetings. You understand? This could have been easy by MK nominating another person to serve in the JSC, or Judge Klopp himself, who I studied with at Forte in 1978, could have declined nomination for this particular position, but to any other position. So really it's mind-boggling in law that this application was made in the first place. It's mind-boggling, unless there was a hidden political motive for it. Otherwise, it was a non-starter from the beginning. Thank you.
I was about to ask you that what do you do when you are dealing with a client who is a political player, being in the form of the MK party, and your client tells you that not an inch will be given for free. I want us to fight on at every level, at every stage, every staircase. We will fight for our rights. So it seems to me that they've reframed the argument and moved it away from the rationality or otherwise of having Dr. John Hlophe as being a member of the JSC as the main issue that will be argued a bit later on, but reframed it as one for an interim interdict against the interviews proceeding on the basis that his rights were going to be violated.
I can assure you that Judge Klopp he knows from the beginning that that case will not have succeeded. This is like a guerrilla warfare within the sphere of law. It's guerrilla warfare within the sphere of law. That's all that I can say. He's intelligent enough to have known that it will not have succeeded, including his lawyer. So this is just stirring up the honestness to sow confusion in Parliament. You know, that we don't disagree with you. 2/3 majority of the people through the National Assembly voted to impeach him for gross misconduct. That's 2/3 of us. And that should have been respected by him and his lawyers.
Yeah. So I guess this was not under argument in the current case, though, Bond. And I still want to take you to the point that says, didn't his lawyers have at least the legal professional responsibility to carry out the mandate that says open another avenue that has to do with the interim interdict?
Yeah, it was hopeless, because we are saying stop your interviews whilst we are putting our house in order. Whilst the appeal, there was no appeal on an interim interdict. In fact, you cannot appeal against an interim interdict unless there's grave injustice. It was not even appealed against. Theoretically, let's say there was an appeal against the Western Cape interim interdict, then surely he could have presided from today, but that was not even the case. You are asking the court to disobey an order. You're asking JSC to disobey an order of the court that flouts Section 165, subsection 5. So that's why I'm saying,
right?
It's mindless. It's boggling the mind why that application had to be. I'm sorry, I have to be brutally frank. It's mind-boggling why the application had to be started in the first place.
All right, Bond Nyoga, I've got to thank you. That's Bond Nyoga, who is attorney and legal analyst, weighing in on the court matters that have been playing themselves out around the hearings and the interviews of the JSC, which are scheduled to start today. At 7 a.m., let's check in with N. Musa with the latest news.
Outsurance will go out of their way to try and save you money on your car insurance. If they can't, ask for 500 Rand. SMS out to 30754. Now that's good news.
In our top stories, 3 suspects to appear in court in connection with Thulasizwe mass shootings and commemorations begin to mark anniversary attack on Israel. Good morning. 3 suspects are expected to appear in court today in connection with various crimes in Thulasizwe in the Eastern Cape. Police Minister Senzo Mchunu and the National Police Commissioner Fani Masimula say these suspects have also been identified as persons of interest regarding the killing of 18 people in the area more than a week ago. Mchunu and Masimula addressed the media after a memorial service of the 18 people who were killed in 2 shooting incidents in Ngobazana village. The Thulasizwe party has called off a planned picket outside the venue at which the Judicial Services Commission will hold its interviews to fill vacancies in various courts in the country. The JSC will today begin with interviews to fill 3 vacancies in the Supreme Court of Appeal. The Commission received the green light to proceed after the High Court in Johannesburg dismissed the party's application to have the sitting postponed. The party now says it will explore other legal avenues. Zoleka Kodashe reports.
The judgment of the Gauteng High Court in Johannesburg has cleared the way for the 2-week-long session to begin without Thulasizwe Party parliamentary leader Dr. John Hlophe, as per the order of the Western Cape High Court. The interviews will see over 50 candidates vying for positions in the judiciary. This week will see the JSC interviewing vacancies to fill, among others, 3 vacancies in the Supreme Court of Appeal, the Gauteng division, which has 6 vacancies and is the busiest division in the country, as well as the KZN division, which also has 6 vacancies and a vacant position for Deputy Judge President.
COSATU says it's ready for its nationwide strike against unemployment today. The action will coincide with World Day for Decent Work. The Labour Federation says it seeks to highlight high unemployment, income inequality and poverty that have characterized the country's economic crisis. Zanele Sabela is COSATU's national spokesperson.
It's about the fact that even the people that actually have the jobs, these jobs are not decent. We've seen how when the Department of Employment and Labour inspectors went out there to look at restaurants, how people were told to hide in ceilings. And the young lady who was on TikTok was talking about how she was being treated, how she and her colleagues were treated at her workplace. So it's about decent jobs, but not just that. It's also the fact that 11.3 million people in this country need jobs. But at the same time as that is happening, there are these continuing retrenchments that are taking place.
The Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment Department is expected to welcome the SA Agulhas 2 on its return from the Gough Island 2024 relief voyage today. The ship was designed to carry out scientific research. It returns a month after it left with a team of scientists who relieved another team that had been on the island for 14 months. The department spokesperson Peter Mbelengwa.
The island hosts South African Weather Observation Station, which is one of the 3 extremely important weather stations globally. The station assists with data collection, scientific research, monitoring of climate change impacts and fluctuations, and monitoring the impact of severe weather events on the South African coastline.
And finally, candlelight vigils and memorials have been held in European capitals to remember those killed in Israel a year ago. Later today, there'll be an official ceremony in Jerusalem, and President Isaac Herzog will lead a memorial to mark the first anniversary of the Hamas attack on Israel. The Hamas-run health ministry says Israel's military offensive has since killed more than 41,000 Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. Recapping the top story, 3 suspects are expected to appear in court today in connection with various crimes in Thulasizwe in the Eastern Cape. For SAFM News, I am Anne Musa.
Those were the top stories for this hour. Don't miss out on a possible car insurance saving. SMS out to 30754 for a quote. Outsurance, where you always get something out. The cost of living crisis is real. Here's what one Outsurance client did about it.
I'm Amy. I'm 26 from Kenilworth. When I got my 2022 Ford EcoSport, the immediate thought was to phone Outsurance, and I pay only 819 Rand per month. No insurers were able to beat or match the premium that I'm currently paying.
Want a car insurance premium that that'll blow your mind? SMS out to 30754 now. That's out to 30754. Outsurance is a licensed insurer and FSP. T's and C's online.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Pretty urgent announcement to avoid Galilee's interchange. Been a crash causing major delays today. The collision just north of the interchange. So you've got a really big backlog on the N3 that's super heavy from Eland's interchange in Germiston all the way through almost to Linksfield before you're out of that. And given the location of that crash, it's having an almighty impact on the N12 and R24 routes coming in from sort of Ekurhuleni, because as you get through Galilee's and fly over ramp onto the N3, you're on-ramping right into that crash. So major delays. N3 north, N12, R24 routes westbound. Stay off it, get on to some local alternatives. An issue on the N1 south this morning as well, a crash before you get to Old Joburg Road, so that's quite heavy. And then a big backlog through Allendale down to Buccleuch interchange. It's a busy N1 this morning. And also a crash on the N14 driving to Pretoria between the R55, Pretoria West exit and Brockfontein interchange. That's quite a heavy queue as well. Durban, a bit busier than you might be expecting on the run between Amanzimtoti and Prospect, and that run up Twinney Hill is looking a lot slower than normal. And Cape Town today, plenty of messages coming in about how thick the sand is in places on Baden-Powell Drive at Monmouthbisi and at Coastal Park. So if you're moving between Khayelitsha and Muizenberg, just drive very carefully. At least one vehicle already stuck in that thick sand, and a vehicle overturning on Ottery Road at the M5 bridge, causing some delays locally. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
In sports this hour, SA teams shine. NURC and Mackenzie welcomes the host of Wool Rally Raid Championship. More details at 7:30.
The Morning Brief with Thulasizwe Simelane. Weekdays, Monday to Friday, 6 to 9 a.m. The Morning Brief with Thulasizwe Simelane. Weekdays, Monday to Friday, 6 to 9 a.m.
8 minutes after 7 on this Monday, the 7th of October, 2024. Good morning, South Africa. This is the Morning Brief, and it's the second hour. It's all the local and international news, current affairs, insights and opinions you need to lead the conversation today. I'm Thulasizwe Simelane, and I'm here to deliver your Morning Brief. Well, among the stories that we will cover in this hour is this. The Minister of Public Service and Administration, Mzamo Buthelezi, has declined requests by 3 ministers to deviate from minimum appointment requirements within their departments. The Agriculture Minister, John Steenhuisen, and the Water and Sanitation Minister, Phemima Jordina, as well as the Mineral and Petroleum Resources Minister, Gwede Mantashe, wanted to be allowed to deviate from minimum qualification and experience requirements to be able to make certain appointments within their ministries. The Minister of Public Service and Administration, Mzamo Buthelezi, sending them back to the drawing boards, basically saying that that is not approved. We will delve into that issue within this half hour to look at the implications thereof, but also in the context of the Government of National Unity having stated clearly that part of its intention is to build a capable state and an ethical developmental state. How does that tally with the attempts by these ministers to appoint people that they say are not suitably qualified? Or are they at large to do that within the realm of political appointments as opposed to administrative and technocratic appointments? You can weigh in on that as well. So that's one of the stories that we will cover today. Of course, we will also flag COSATU is calling today a national day of action against the crippling unemployment and economic crisis in the country, and they're calling a strike for today. So those are just two of the stories that we will cover for you within this hour. We also have all of your regulars, of course, but importantly, we will take your calls. You can give us a call on these and other issues, and the number to dial for that is 086 000 2032. I'll also take your WhatsApp voice notes on 061 410 4107. The second hour of the Morning Brief starts now.
The wait is finally over, and we can safely say that Tropica Island of Treasure is back to serve you some really great entertainment. Tune into S3 from the 28th of September to cheer on the 7 teams who will be vying to win a shared prize of 1 million rand, a brand new car each, and become the champions of Tropica Island of Treasure Season 11. Fancy $50,000? Predict the champions of Tropica Island of Treasure and you might be sipping that cold, refreshing Tropica all the way to the bank. Follow at MyTropica and at SABC3 for more information. Channel your inner champion with Tropica Island of Treasure starts Saturday the 28th of September at 6:30 p.m. only on S3. Open up. S3.
The Leopards and Taifa Stars have a big battle in the top of the table clash. DRC is only interested in 3 points to maintain their winning rhythm, while the East Africans also want victory to sustain their unbeaten run in Group H. This is the Total Energies AFCON 2025 qualifier. Experience the journey to Morocco, DR Congo versus Tanzania on Thursday 10 October at 6 p.m. Live everywhere for everyone, always on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
Becoming Elizabeth is the fascinating story of the early life of England's most iconic queen. With no clear heir, the death of King Henry VIII sets into motion a dangerous scramble for power. Elizabeth's fascinating and factual journey to secure the crown is filled with scheming, betrayal, and illicit relationships that threaten to bring forth her demise. At a time in which every man or woman of the court is on the wheel of fortune, which may take them to a position of great power one moment, or the executioner's block the next. Channel your inner royalty with Becoming Elizabeth, Saturdays at 9:30 p.m. only on S3. Open up. S3.
Thulasizwe Simelane on SAFM.
So one of the dominant stories you will hear today is the JSC interviews that are set to get underway. The Judicial Service Commission will begin interviewing candidates for various positions this morning. The commission is going ahead despite contestation from the Umkhonto weSizwe party. The JSC is set to interview 54 candidates for 26 vacancies at the Supreme Court of Appeal and other various High Court divisions across the country. Let's bring into the conversation Chris Oxtoby, a research consultant with Freedom Under Law. Good morning to you, Chris. So we have the backdrop to this round of interviews being the contestation around the participation or otherwise of Dr. John Hlophe and the court action that has preceded today's interviews. Does that, all of that has happened prior to today, factor in at all when the JSC sits for these interviews today?
It shouldn't, no. I mean, you're quite right that it's been an absolutely dominant feature of the build up to the interviews. We've not even been thinking and talking about who the candidates are and the positions that are being interviewed for, because the attention has been so much on the appearance or the non-appearance of Dr. Hlophe. But the court process up until this week has really run its course for now. Of course, it's got to be finally resolved still. But in terms of the actual interviews that are going to take place today and onwards, it shouldn't have any impact on that. No.
Let's go into the substance then of why these interviews are important. There's a massive backlog in appointments, isn't there? In as far as the higher courts are concerned.
Yeah, there's several issues that make them very important. As you point out, there are positions right at the top of the court system that need to be filled. The Supreme Court of Appeal, for which we're having the interviews today, has lost an enormous amount of experience due to judges retiring and so on over the last few years. So it's really important for that court to get new judges in. There's also a piece of context where the courts generally are really seriously overworked. There's stories about how one has to wait till 2028 or 2029 to get a trial date in the Gauteng High Court, for example. So the courts are having to work with some serious case backlogs. Now, whilst making appointments this week is not going to entirely fix that on its own, it is very important that that appointments can be made to help the courts deal with that backlog. So that's also a really important piece of context, that we have courts that are quite seriously stretched and overworked. So these appointments are really crucial to help them manage that workload.
Chris, in terms of the tone of the JSC, we know very little about it, right? This particular composition of the JSC, and that's because there are so many new commissioners that have come in after the elections. How important is tone and the dignity of the candidate while being rigorous in the interviewing process?
I think that's an absolutely central and crucial aspect of the process. So one point when we were talking about backlogs at the apex of the court system, of course, one of the elephants in the room is that there's a vacancy on the Constitutional Court, which has been open for now going on for 3 years. And the JSC is not interviewing for it this week because it hasn't got enough candidates, not for the first time. Now, we don't know exactly what the reason for that is, but certainly one of the factors that people have thought may be involved is that the JSC has a reputation for not treating candidates fairly, for being overly confrontational, and basically for not being an environment that people are prepared to put themselves through. So it is crucially important that balance, which you rightly point out, is struck, that we are rigorous and we carefully scrutinize people who we are going to appoint to our courts, but at the same time do that in a way that treats people fairly equally and is relevant to looking at whether they are suitable. Now, unfortunately, the JSC's practice over the years has been quite inconsistent in whether it's done that. So it's really important to see how that works this week.
Lastly, the participation of the Justice Minister, Thulasizwe Simelane, under the circumstances in which there have been these questions that have been asked about the loan that she got from a VBS broker, VBS investment broker.
Yes.
How important will that be, given also that, among the people, and thanks to the reporting of Freni Rapkin on this, the Ethel Trollip as well is among the new commissioners. Makes for an interesting dynamic, doesn't it?
It really does make for a very interesting dynamic indeed. And a lot of people who were calling for the minister to be suspended or to step down because of these allegations were specifically highlighting her role on the JSC and asking questions about is she in fact able to make the kind of assessments about ethical qualities of candidates for judicial office when she's under this kind of cloud herself. So I think people will be watching quite closely the kind of questions that she asks, the kind of outlook that she brings to the position. The dynamic with Ethel Trollip will be very interesting, but it won't be the first time that two people with tensions between them have sat on the same JSC panel. So I don't think it will cause a problem to the functioning, but it'll be fun to watch.
All right, let's leave it there. Chris Oxtoby is a research consultant with Freedom Under Law.
At Business Outsurance, ensuring your business is our business. Switch to Business Outsurance today, and you could get a massive 20% discount on your business insurance premium. Get affordable cover to protect your business against everyday risks. Get the best business insurance at the best price for your business. SMS quote to 43328. That's quote to 43328 to switch and save today. Licensed insurer and FSP. TCs and information online.
The Stallions get it that the only way to remain on top of Group L is through a win. However, the Swallows refuse to be left behind. They target a second victory to move away from the third position. This is the Total Energies AFCON 2025 qualifier. Experience the journey to Morocco, Burkina Faso versus Burundi on Thursday, 10 October at 9 p.m. Live everywhere for everyone, always on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game. My name is Bonolo Motuba.
I'm 17. My school was far from home and my parents were spending large amounts on transport. That's why they moved me to UCT Online High School, and it's been amazing. With savings on transport and uniforms, I was able to get ahead and stay ahead. Visit uctonlinehighschool.com to learn more. Applications close 29 November 2024.
Big stories of the day. #The Morning Brief.
Let's move to the story now. The Minister of Public Service and Administration, Mzamo Buthelezi, has declined requests by 3 ministers to deviate from minimum appointment requirements within their departments. That's the Agriculture Minister, John Steenhuisen, his Water and Sanitation counterpart, Phemi Majodina, and the Mineral and Petroleum Resources Minister, Gwede Mantashe. They have been sent back to the drawing boards to find suitably qualified candidates to appoint in their ministerial offices after the Department of Public Service and Administration rejected their requests to deviate from the minimum appointment requirements for various vacancies. This was revealed in Buthelezi's written reply to a parliamentary question raised by my next guest, that is the Rise Mzansi MP, Makashule Kana, who joins me now on the line. Good morning to you, Makashule. Thank you for your time. So you raised this question, and I imagine that there's a specific reason, because we heard a few weeks ago that there were rumblings about, the appointments that the Minister of Agriculture was seeking to make and seeking the authority to deviate from minimum requirements. I suppose you wanted us to close the loop on how far did that process go?
Good morning to you, Thulasizwe. Correct in terms of wanting to close the process, but also to understand the extent to which ministers want to request deviations and appoint people who do not meet the minimum requirements for the job. Because for too long, Thulasizwe, people have used the backroom staff positions more for patronage rather than for ensuring that the right qualified people are appointed. One thing that they forget is that the people are working for the state. Just because someone is working in a minister's office, in the president's office, in an MEC's office, doesn't make them less of a state employee than any other state employee. Therefore, when we talk of a professional public service, it must include the people that are appointed to support ministers, premiers, and deputy ministers. So we welcome this decline, the Minister Nkosi Buthelezi, for declining this request, because it sends a very strong message to ourselves as politicians that when we assume office, it must not just be now that we have positions of for people to support us, then we can take just anybody just because we will then claim that no, these are support staff. No, support staff must be qualified, because if someone is to offer advice to a minister of whatever portfolio, they must be qualified to do that particular job, because we are paying that person as taxpayers to do the job very well.
Was there something in particular, though, about this round of intended appointments that required that they should be qualified? I seem to recall that some of them, at least one of them, had to do with the position of media liaison officer and other positions as well.
So, Thulasizwe, the Public Service and Administration, you will know a couple of years back, issued the ministerial handbook that then stipulated the minimum requirements for the positions in the support staff. Because what used to happen in the past, Thulasizwe, was that the ministers, premiers, and MECs will just appoint anyone into, let's say, someone earning over 2 million rands, but they do not even have a matric. That's what used to happen, and there was an outcry in the country. And following that outcry, the Department of Public Service and Administration then had introduced minimum requirements for the jobs in the ministers and MEC's offices that required the people to possess certain qualification and experience before they can be appointed to those positions. So what we want to see is that every employee for that's employed to support a minister and MEC must be qualified for the job that they are being employed for. There are so many graduates in this country. So ourselves, as political players, then it's up to us to then recruit people before we assume office. We must recruit people that are qualified.
All right, thank you for that. That's Makashule Kana there. He is Rise Mzansi MP who raised that question that has led to the response from Minister Mzamo Buthelezi about the intended appointments that have now been declined by Minister Buthelezi's ministry.
Big stories of the day. Hashtag the morning brief.
Let's focus on this now. In a week's time, the 6th, I believe it is, the 6th annual International Social Justice Conference will take place in Cape Town. The purpose of the conference is to interrogate research, policies and legal developments on world hunger. It aims to accelerate the pace of addressing hunger as one of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. I'm joined now by Professor Thuli Madonsela, Law Trust Chair in Social Justice and Law Professor at the University of Stellenbosch. Good morning to you, Prof. Thank you for your time. So your theme this year has to do with SDG 2, hunger. Why is this the issue of this moment?
Good morning, and thank you for this privilege. We chose hunger because it is becoming a huge problem on our campus. Student hunger is a big problem. In society, child hunger and hunger among those not in employment, education, or training has reached extreme proportions. And it's not just a problem in South Africa, it's a global problem. That's why it is both a theme for the summit on the 18th and the international conference on the 17th.
So what is the potential of this gathering to be able to make, some forward movement in trying to respond to the situation of hunger in this country, across the continent, and perhaps even globally? What about the conference makes it the suitable platform for solution seeking?
The conference has the ability to harvest research from all over the world. Firstly, in quantifying the extent of hunger, identifying the causes and influencing factors, from agriculture and climate change to economic factors such as lack of income, the cost of food, and the waste of food. Secondly, it is also to showcase some of the things that governments and civil society are doing to combat hunger. And lastly, to measure how far are we in achieving SDG 2 on zero hunger by 2030, which is in about 5.5 years' time. And then agree on what are we going to do collectively and individually to plug the gap if we really are going to end hunger by 2030.
Lastly, Prof, the framing, I see part of your framing of the discussion that's upcoming has to do with food, the right to food. To what extent is it treated as a right in South Africa, with the attendant expectation that, the state and other organs would do everything to ensure the progressive realization of the right to food, for example?
Excellent question. Part of the conference's objectives is to highlight the fact that it's not a charity question. The right to food or freedom from hunger is a constitutional right in countries such as South Africa, and a global human right that is protected by the Universal Declaration on Human Rights and the Convention on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. And part of what we're going to do here is to identify, if it is a right, who is the bearer of that right? And we're looking at people from birth to old age. Who is the bearer of that right? And who is the duty bearer? For example, we struggled at the symposium. We had a symposium on the same issue, the right to food and freedom from hunger. And it was unclear who is the duty bearer for people who are not in school, not in employment, and not disabled or old age people.
Yeah.
And including students, who is the duty bearer when they are hungry? Yes.
All right, let's leave it there. Thank you for your time this morning. That is Professor Thulasizwe Simelane, who is the Law Trust Chair in Social Justice and also a law professor at the University of Stellenbosch. Bringing us to 29 minutes to 8. Let's check in with Ann Musa now with the latest news headlines.
Good morning. Thanks to us. In the headlines, the organisation Business Unity South Africa has raised concerns over the economic impact of COSATU's nationwide strike scheduled for today. The Deputy Minister of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities has called on all stakeholders to work together to fight crime in the country. She was delivering a message of support at the memorial service of 18 victims who were killed in Lusikisiki in the Eastern Cape. And the Thulasizwe party has called off a planned picket outside the venue at which the Judicial Service Commission will hold its interviews to fill vacancies in various courts in the country. I'll have details on these and other stories at 8.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
It's a very busy back to work Monday as we line up around some major incidents today. One of them is Galuli's interchange. A crash just north of the interchange a little bit earlier this morning is backing traffic significantly. The N3 is back through to Elan's interchange, reaching back towards sort of Rand Airport interchange and back towards Voortrekker on the N12. And then behind that, there's some massive queues coming in on the N12 and R24. N12 from Craft Road, R24 halfway back towards Barber Road. Those highways are really badly backed up. Trying to avoid them, stay off the run, getting into Galuli's. Also coming through Midrand is under pressure. A crash before Old Joburg Road. Another one down at the Buccleuch interchange. So Route 1 from Brockfontein to Buccleuch, solid all the way. And a crash on the N14, the Krugersdorp Highway heading to Pretoria. That collision scene just before Brockfontein, and that queue back towards the R55 Pretoria West exit. A reminder of the big crash on WFN Como near Manhattan Flats. If you're coming out of Attridgeville this morning, certainly some extra delays noticeable there. Munzum Toti through to Prospecton, busy on the N2 North, the M7 going into Pinetown. Looks like lights are still down at St John's Avenue. It's another busy run into that central Pinetown area. Cape Town, a couple of motorists getting stuck in heavy sand on Baden-Powell between Khayelitsha and Muizenberg. Do take it very, very easily through there. Also a collision scene coming out of Mitchell's Plain on the R300 at the M7, and Milnerton bound coming out of Tableview. Big delays this morning. Monday traffic backing up from Sunningdale all the way through to almost Racecourse Road in that Milnerton area. With your traffic update, I'm Rob Byrne.
This is SAFM Sports with Dumi Nkapele.
Dumi is back with another update, and Dumi, you will start with rugby. I see that South African teams are doing exceptionally well. Well, I don't know if the qualifier exceptionally is warranted, but doing well in the URC?
Absolutely. South Africa's United Rugby Championships teams made a clean sweep this weekend with the Lions, Bulls, Sharks and Stormers all winning their matches. The Lions thrashed Edinburgh 55-21, while the Bulls scored 7 tries to claim a 47-21 win over Ulster at Loftus Versfeld. The Sharks, on the other hand, narrowly defeated the Dragons 33-30 in a bonus point win. Finally, the Stormers scoring a bonus point 36-5 win over Zebra. Then in motorsport, Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture Gayton McKenzie has welcomed the decision to host a World Rally Raid Championship race in South Africa. The race will take place from the 18th to the 24th of May next year and will be followed by the Dakar Rally, meaning that Africa will host 2 major motorsport events in the same year. In cricket, India beat Pakistan by 6 wickets for their first win of the Women's T20 World Cup, chasing 106 to win. Shafali Verma top scored 32 from 35 to help India to win with 7 balls to spare. In domestic cricket, Eddie Moore helped Western Province claim a 7-wicket win over Titans in their T20 challenge at Supersport Park yesterday. Moore hit an impressive 88 off 47 balls, hitting 9 fours and 5 sixes. Earlier on, the Titans posted 143 for 8 in their overs. Then in football, Stellenbosch FC coach Steve Barker has joined the call for VAR in South Africa after losing to Orlando Pirates in the MTN 8 final this weekend. Barker believes that the Buccaneers were assisted by referee Abungile Tom to win the MTN 8 final.
I'm not sure. I think there had been at some stage a point that they were looking to target the final, this one to implement VR. Unfortunately, did not. But yeah, it just seems like there's just far too many big calls that are not going the right way. And I think intervention of VR will help. Refs are human. I don't think the refs gone and purposefully made the mistake. It's just a lot's happening. It's the 90th minute of a cup final. They take a quick free kick. He suddenly looks, it's a goal. He's got that decision to make. Do I let it stand? Do I not let it stand? He's elected to let the goal stand. So, VAR would have, I believe, intervention would have said, listen, restart. It wasn't taken at the right place. You were still speaking to the players. He had any.
Meanwhile, University of Pretoria coach Mort Khumalo will take charge of Banyana squad that is set to compete in the upcoming COSAFA Women's Championship. This is due to coach Desiree Ellis set to travel with a different squad to play friendlies against Denmark and England on the 25th and 29th of October, respectively. On that note, is a wrap from my side for now. I'll have more in the next hour.
The Business Update on SAFM.
Let's welcome Dauleng Lechela once again. Dauleng, your next update reads a bit like the periodic table, right, in science. Let's start with lithium miner. Tell me about Rio Tinto confirming their bid to acquire a lithium miner.
Second largest miner, Rio Tinto, making further investments in critical minerals, a growing trend we've been seeing this year. Just last week, we spoke about that PwC mining report that revealed that M&A activities upbeat in the sector, with deals for critical minerals surging. Now, the miner listed in London has submitted a takeover bid for Arcadium Lithium. The deal is worth $3.3 billion. Rio's approach to Arcadium comes as miners are eager to secure supplies of critical minerals needed to power the global energy transition, and comes after weeks of speculation over the deal. Now, if the deal goes through, it would make Rio one of the world's top lithium suppliers. This is significant because lithium is a crucial component in batteries for EVs and electronic devices, which are expected to be in high demand. Now, Arcadium's stock has plummeted over 50% since January due to declining lithium prices, largely caused by China's oversupply. Now, this downturn has made the company an appealing takeover target. Analysts, in the meantime, have raised concerns around the pricing of the takeover, with some suggesting that if the management of U.S. miner Arcadium believes in its growth potential, they should hold out for a sale price of around $8 billion rather than settling for a lower opportunistic offer, pointing to Rio's $3.3 billion offer.
And the other element on your periodic table update at this hour, platinum. I see Northern Platinum, it says it's reducing its reliance on Eskom.
Sticking with mining there, about 2 months ago, when Northam released its annual earnings, company CEO Paul June was quite optimistic about energy security in the country, but warned that double-digit electricity tariff hikes threaten the company's sustainability amid declining profits and reliance on Eskom. And so it's been moving quicker to secure alternative energy sources. The miner has announced a power purchase agreement to build an 80-megawatt solar plant for its Zondereinde operation in Limpopo. This renewable energy project, developed in partnership with an independent power producer, marks the mining group's first venture into clean energy. Northern Platinum's new solar plant will provide its Zondereinde operation with 220 gigawatts of electricity every year. freeing it from reliance on Eskom's national grid. Now, this move reduces the risk of power outages and cuts energy costs significantly. The new solar plant will not only save costs, but also shrink Zondereinde's carbon footprint by 22%. This aligns with Northern Platinum's ambitious environmental goals, targeting a 60% reduction in carbon emissions by 2030. The plant is expected to be operational and start supplying power by December next year.
All right, please give us another recap of how the U.S. closed Asian markets and the JSE as well.
It's green screens in Asia. Earlier on, it did seem like tensions in the Middle East and dashed hopes for big rate cuts were weighing on sentiment, but that's not the case anymore, and stocks have continued to climb. The Japanese Nikkei leading the gains there, up over 2%, followed by Hong Kong's Hang Seng rising 1.4%. In Wall Street, futures are flat, just below the flat line. This ahead of the U.S. consumer inflation print, which is out on Thursday. Another gorge watched closely by markets and the Fed. Back at home, markets on the back foot, closing mostly in the red last week. The All-Share down 0.15%, and the Rand edging closer to the 17.50 mark as the dollar makes gains. It's sitting at 17.48 to the greenback.
All right, Dowling, thank you for that. And Dowling Lichela will be back with one more update for you just before the opening of trade for the day at the JSE. And you can look out for that update just before 9 a.m. here on the Morning Brief.
Africa Update on SAFM.
For that, let's welcome Advocate Sipho Mantula. Good morning to you, Raz. I hope you had a great weekend.
Refreshing morning to us. Indeed, have a great weekend. And as you know, the peace and security dialogue kept me busy over this weekend.
Yeah. So let's start in Tunisia then, Raz. The country where, the sparks, the flames of the then Arab Spring were first triggered. They've gone to the elections, and I see that the supporters of the current president are not even waiting for the final official results, already started celebrating.
That is quite true, Tulas. When you look at the figures and the numbers, Tulas, Tunisia decided over this weekend. And when you look at the numbers from the Electoral Commission as they closed the polls yesterday, 27%, Tulas, very low when you look at the 2019 numbers. But Saide was on the lead with 89.2% of the votes. And when you say supporters were already celebrating, remember there are only 3 candidates for the presidential. So one will say that it is still early. It will only be when the Electoral Commission confirms who have won those elections, looking at the tensions that have been going on since 2019. Because we cannot go to 2011 of the Arab Spring. We have to look at the current challenges that are facing Tunisia. But as I've said to you, Tulas, there was a voter turnout was very low, and the Electoral Commission by this week has to confirm who has won those elections in Tunisia. We don't even get the election observer mission report, Tulas. That's how sad it is when you look at the North Africa, when you are talking of the deficit of democracy.
Sure, 27% turnout is really problematic for any democracy. Speaking of elections, we are inching ever closer to the elections in Mozambique, and campaigning continues there with observers starting to hit the ground.
Absolutely, Tulas. We're talking of 48 hours before Mozambique decides, and we're talking of the European Union, the SADC Observer Mission, the African Union. The SADC is led by the former president of Zanzibar, who has arrived in Mozambique, Dr. Amani Abedi Karume. He has already arrived. And when you look at Commonwealth, it's led by the former Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Kenny Anthony, who's leading that observer mission. And that's how when you look at Tulas, there will be most of them out of Mozambique after the 15 new European Union. I look at their numbers, 32 long-term observers who will be observing the 11 provinces. But from SADC, we don't get anything so far, Tulas. But what is interesting is that once you have observers observing this final run of the elections, one can say in Mozambique by today, all those election political parties will do their end of campaigning, and then we wait for Wednesday when Mozambique decides. We're still looking at David Chapo from Frelimo being one of the candidates, and as well as from Renamo Usof Momade, and David Chapo taking from Philip Music. It's age 65 and Daniel Chapo age 47. So Mozambique decides to, despite, as we have said, Cabo Delgado is still a challenge for these elections.
Let's go back to West Africa and specifically in Ghana. In South Africa, we call them Zamazamas. In Zimbabwe, they're called Makorokozas. And I think in Ghana, they're called Galamsey, the system there. And it's a huge problem for a country that produces so much gold, the issue of illegal mining.
Absolutely, Tulas. There have been protests from the communities and from the civil society since Thursday until over the weekend on Saturday, calling on government to put pressure on, as you have said, the Galamsey, the Zamazamas of Ghana, of the land of Kwame Nkrumah. They are raising one issue, Tulas. They are damaging the environment. Once you have them, it is not the issue of who's the middleman, who's taking those mineral deficit, but in Ghana, there's a serious challenge that there was a protest over this weekend where communities are calling on the government to stop illegal mining in the land of Kwame Nkrumah.
And then in the Horn of Africa, I see there's a bit of issues between Ethiopia and Somalia. And this time around, it has to do with the allegation of water being released to cause flooding. What's that story about?
You know, Tulas, it is very sad. When you are busy on the peace and security, we dealt with the Horn of Africa. And when we talk of Horn of Africa, Somalia, Ethiopia, Sudan, Djibouti comes in. But when we talk of the water battles or the water crisis, remember Boutros Ghali. The 21st century battle will be around water. Ethiopia released the water reservoirs in the downstreams, and the president of Mogadishu accuses Ethiopia by sending pictures saying that you have caused the floods, and Ethiopia needs that water for hydropower, in terms of energy security. And that's where you find this tension going on. Despite that, we have that Somaliland and Ethiopian crisis. We have the question of Ethiopia also having a line with Somaliland and recognizing them. And that's where you find this question of the two horns of Africa in this issue of releasing of water and the floods. But like I said to you, the peace and security dialogue that we have over this weekend with the former heads of state, it was that tension. How do we deal with the Horn of Africa and its challenges 60 years later? Because if you look, the Horn of Africa has been a cause of contention in the AU and in the African continent over the border disputes, and now is the water conflict and the dispute.
Lastly, Sipho, in your historical archives, you will tell us about this day in 1931. A giant and a titan of South African history was born. Who is it?
This is Mpilo Desmond Tutu, was born on this day, Tulas, a former chairperson of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. He was not born in Gauteng, by the way, Tulas was from Matlosane, Klerksdorp, Northwest. A bishop who was in the South African Council of Churches, a Nobel Peace Prize winner, a first black archbishop of the Church of the Province of Southern Africa in Cape Town. Remember, Bishop Tutu used to talk about the gravy train. He used to talk about many things. But this is one person who stayed also at Vilakazi Street. For our listeners' sake, the house of Bishop Tutu and the house of Nelson Mandela is because of two great Nobel Peace Prize winners were in the same street in Soweto. But he is from Northwest Province. He was born, he will have been 93, Tulas, in our historical archives. Asante sana, Tulas, and start leading the conversation. SAFM leading the conversation as you're observing the Africa Human Rights Month.
All right, thank you for that. That's Sipho Mantula there with the Africa Update, as he always does, and he will deliver it to you again tomorrow.
For 18 years, Kumbulekaya has been fostering healing through forgiveness and reconciliation.
Are you asking me that? Yes. I grew up without a mom.
So what happened to your family?
What family? You are my family. What happened to you?
Witness as families forgive one another and reunite after a long time. Catch the new season of Kumbulekaya on SABC 1 every Wednesday at 9 p.m.
For years, Outsurance has been saying they'll save you money on your car insurance, or you can ask for 500 Rand or 1,500 Rand cash if they don't. Here's Fundi, 46 from Brackenfell.
I was not happy with what I was paying. I heard about the 500 Rand from Outsurance, but they give me lesser amount for my car. I'm paying 523 Rand on my 2013 Hyundai iX35.
So here's how it works. SMS out to 30754. We'll give you a no-obligation car insurance quote. If the quote is less than you're currently paying, you'll end up saving money on your car insurance every month. And if it's more than you're currently paying, you can ask for 500 Rand. And if you've been with the same insurer and claim free for 3 years or more, tell us you want 1,500 Rand.
Give our children a call. It's a win-win. You can't lose.
SMS out to 30754 now. That's out to 30754. OUTsurance is a licensed insurer and FSP. T's, C's and limits apply. Premiums are risk profile dependent and reviewed annually. Client comments do not constitute financial advice.
CAF President Dr. Patrice Motsepe said, the exponential growth and global competitiveness of football in Africa has resulted in substantial interests from major African and international broadcasters in African football. SABC has been participating competitively in the CAF media rights bids. CAF welcomes them as partners, joining a number of CAF's media rights holders. We are committed to ensuring that CAF's competitions, including its broadcast products, are world-class.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
It's a very busy Monday for those working around some incidents. Here are the worst of them. The N1 going up into Pretoria. There's a crash near Boerta Avenue. That queue is back to Brockfontein and back behind that onto the N14 all the way to Pretoria West exit, the R55. So if you're up from sort of Diepsloot, Lanseria area, off-ramp at the R55 and hit some alternative routes to avoid the N14, then onto the N1 all the way through to Boerta Avenue. At the same time, a crash on the bottom of the N1 through Midrand at Buccleuch, and that means a big queue coming through from the Brockfontein interchange. There's no gaps in that run from Centurion down through Midrand into Joburg. It's heavily backed up, and a crash in at Galulis this morning causing chaos out east. The N3 into Galulis just past the interchanges where the crash is. The N3 queues from Rand Airport, the N12 queues from Voortrekker Road, and then behind that the N12 is really bad coming through from Boksburg, the R24 from Barbara Road. Really big backlogs from Ekurhuleni just trying to get into Galulis and get past that crash scene, so a good one to avoid. The R21 going north up towards the Benoni exit, that's quite slow. An unusual backlog leaving the airport en route towards Pretoria and Tembisa. At Durban this morning, M4 Southern Freeway, that's heavy into the city centre. The N3 from Pavilion to Sherwood looking quite busy as well. And Cape Town, a reminder of the sand patches on Baden-Powell Drive. Some motorists have been stuck this morning. It's that thick and heavy. So Monwabisi and particularly Coastal Park, just pay attention to sandy conditions. Very busy getting into central Stellenbosch. All approaches jam-packed after the weekend. And Marine Drive stays under pressure from Sunningdale right through to the Sunset Beach area. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
The Leopards and Taifa Stars have a big battle in the top of the table clash. DRC is only interested in 3 points to maintain their winning rhythm, while the East Africans also want victory to sustain their unbeaten run in Group H. This is the Total Energies AFCON 2025 qualifier. Experience the journey to Morocco, DR Congo versus Tanzania on Thursday, 10 October at 6 p.m. Live everywhere for everyone, always on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
The Morning Brief with Thulasizwe Simelane.
All right, let's take you to the intersection of labor and politics now. The Congress of South African Trade Unions, COSATU, is calling on workers to down tools today as part of what it calls a National Day of Action against a crippling economic crisis. The Trade Union Federation says the strike aims to address rising unemployment, poverty, and the escalating cost of living. I'm joined now by COSATU's spokesperson, Zanele Sabela, to tell us about this National Day of Action. Good morning to you, Zanele. Thank you for your time. So what exactly are you aiming to achieve? Merely dramatizing and raising the issues profile, or some kind of movement forward by way of achieving concessions on issues such as retrenchments?
We are raising workers' voices to say these issues that we are concerned about need to be taken seriously by both government and business. Because, these policies that, government has been adhering to for the longest time are just not working for any of us. The economy is stagnant. There are no jobs. 11.3 people are looking for jobs, need jobs. Some have been looking, haven't found jobs, and now they're discouraged. And so it is that. But meantime, while that is happening, companies are continuing to retrench workers. And so it's nonsensical. It doesn't make sense that we need jobs, but then there are continuous cuts to jobs, the latest being Siriti announcing 1,100 jobs. Pick and Pay is also aiming to cut 12,000 jobs. When you consider that one job actually supports on average 7 people, then you'll know that we are headed for trouble.
So I hear that you're calling for a moratorium on retrenchments. How would that work in a context where many companies find themselves in financial distress given the economic conditions that you described that also affect business as well?
That's the thing. That's the thing that business, whenever business finds that, the profits that they focused are just are not making it, they're just below that, then the first thing that they think, it's like a default position, the first thing they think of is cutting workers. We are calling for them to think about creative solutions, to engage a little more. A case in point is earlier this year, Mercedes-Benz. Mercedes-Benz last year declared incredible profits, but then 6 months in, when their profits were just not where they thought they would be, now they were willing to cut workers. So that's what we're talking about, that we need creative solutions to these problems. It can't just be every time that you see that there's a bit of a bump in the road, then you are ready to offload workers, because workers are a company's biggest asset.
And on the issue of the cost of living, where are you directing your main demands, given that we have started seeing the easing of inflation, but of course you do raise the issue around Eskom and the tariff hike that they are asking for with NERSA. So where are you directing your demands in as far as the cost of living is concerned?
So this is to everyone. For one, Eskom is threatening to derail this whole thing. We are all now being optimistic given that we've seen that, we're starting now to cut rates and we're looking forward to more rate cuts come November. But with inflation having come down to 4.4% in August, but then if Eskom now if NERSA is granted this more than 36% tariff hike, all of us will be in trouble, including businesses. There's a company that says, we can't at this rate, we will not be able to turn on our smelters. So that's big business. Imagine the poor, imagine the working class. None of us will be able to afford this. And so literally, if this tariff hike is granted, then this whole economy will come to a halt. And so that is something that shouldn't happen. The minister himself has admitted that it would be unsustainable if this particular hike is granted.
Lastly, Zanele, is there a history of these general strikes called by trade union federations? Let's not go back all the way to before the beginning of democracy, but in the last few decades, is there a history of these achieving what they are intended to do?
Definitely, because you'll know that today we're raising all these issues, but then we sit at NEDLEC and we're very active within NEDLEC. And so when these issues are being spoken about, but then it's to raise the voice of workers to say these, because now you'll see that government and business, working together, and we've all reaped rewards, especially with Eskom, that they're working so closely together. But now they have, they're closer. They have a close ear of government. And we also, unfortunately, Jabulani in Soweto doesn't have the same privilege. And today is the time for Jabulani and Dimakatso to make their voices heard, to say, this is what we are unhappy about and we think it needs to be looked at.
All right, thank you for that. That's Zanele Sabela, who is the spokesperson of COSATU, talking to us about their strike action that has to do with the economic crisis in the country. Let's take a listen to one or two of your voice notes and see how many we can fit in and engage with.
Good morning, Thulas. Vincent Rismati in Midrand. Thulas, I'm appalled by the views of the professor that you interviewed there. I think it's quite extreme, and I don't think he's in his right mind. All the things that he said about Iran extinction and the people in the Middle East dying of natural causes, I think it's out of order, really. I'm so disturbed. I don't know how you feel, but personally, I'm not at peace with his views. Vincent here in Midrand. Thank you, Tulas.
Morning, Thulasizwe. Hallelujah. I am very, very worried, man, about COSATU and the thing they are going to do today, shutdown. We don't need shutdown in South Africa. We know those ministers who don't want to create job. For an example, Minister of Health. He sit there by the report of all the hospital they complain about shortage, but doesn't want to implement. So they need to attack people like Minister of Health. That guy, after that, he come on SAFM to tell us about the whole South Africa. There is a crisis of ambulance, but there is nothing. Doesn't have even the plan. He's not fit from that position. No, we need to be honest. He's not fit from that position. But if we can search him, there is a medical aid. It is I can say so. Everything's easy for him. They need to cut those budget. Those ministers are failing us big time. Space in Metosan.
All right, thank you for those. Let's go straight to N Musa now with the latest news update. Essential cover from Outsurance pays out claims in cash, allowing you to choose your own panel beater. SMS CAR to 43187 now.
In our top stories, another mass shooting incident in the Eastern Cape, and Guterres calls for peace 1 year after Hamas attack on Israel. Good morning. We start with breaking news. There's been another mass shooting incident in the Eastern Cape. SABC News has received information that 6 people have been gunned down in Godini village near Kumbu. The deceased are reported to be members of a community policing forum. This is a developing story and will bring you details as it unfolds. The Deputy Minister of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, Mapaseka Litsiki, has called on all stakeholders to work together to fight crime in the country. The Deputy Minister was delivering a message of support at the memorial service of 18 victims killed in Lusikisiki in the Eastern Cape. 15 of the victims were women. 3 suspects have been arrested in connection with other crimes and are persons of interest in the 18 murders. The suspects are expected to appear in court today. Litseke says everyone has a right to life.
No one deserves to die at the hands of another human being. We must end all kinds of violence. Kwanele. As South Africa, we want South Africa that is safe, that is peaceful, and that is secured for all communities.
The organization Business Unity South Africa has raised concerns over the economic impact of COSATU's nationwide strike today. The Labour Federation says the protest action seeks to highlight high unemployment, rampant corruption and the escalating cost of living. The SACP, FEDUSA and other COSATU affiliates will join the strike. BUSA CEO Kuleka Nemate says another concern is the abuse of Section 77, which relates to the certificate issued to grant the Labour Federation permission to strike.
COSATU relies on a certificate that was offered, again, 4 years ago to go on strike. What this does is that it deprives parties in MEDLEC to engage and discuss each proposed strike because the union simply relies on the one that was issued a long time ago under different economic conditions. And we think that that needs to be reformed so that each proposed strike can be discussed by parties at MEDLEC before an authorization is granted.
Meanwhile, COSATU has called on non-essential workers to turn out in their numbers to support its National Day of Action against the country's crippling economic crisis. It's demanding a moratorium on retrenchments. This follows large-scale retrenchments at the South African Post Office and metals group Sibanye Stillwater this year. The Thulasizwe party has called off a planned picket outside the venue at which the Judicial Service Commission will hold its interviews to fill vacancies in various courts in the country. The JSC will today begin with interviews to fill 3 vacancies in the Supreme Court of Appeal. The Commission received the green light to proceed after the High Court in Johannesburg dismissed the party's application to have the sitting postponed. The party now says it will explore other legal avenues. Zoleka Kodashe reports.
The judgment of the Gauteng High Court in Johannesburg has cleared the way for the 2-week-long session to begin without Thulasizwe Party parliamentary leader Dr. John Hlophe, as per the order of the Western Cape High Court. The interviews will see over 50 candidates vie for positions in the judiciary. This week will see the JSC interviewing vacancies to fill, among others, 3 vacancies in the Supreme Court of Appeal, the Gauteng division, which has 6 vacancies and is the busiest division in the country, as well as the KZN division, which also has 6 vacancies and a vacant position for Deputy Judge President.
And finally, the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has marked the first anniversary of the Hamas attack on Israel, with a video message arguing that the time for peace, international law and justice has come. The attack on October the 7th last year resulted in Israel pursuing Hamas in Gaza, a move that has seen the area largely destroyed, with a huge death toll that has included tens of thousands of civilians. Close to 2,000 people died in Israel during the Hamas attack. Sharon Bryce Peace reports.
Guterres expressed his solidarity with all the victims and their loved ones, pointing to a wave of violence and bloodshed that erupted after the October 7th attack last year. He said the war that followed the terrible attacks in Israel continued to shatter lives and inflict profound human suffering for Palestinians in Gaza and now the people of Lebanon. The UN chief again called for the release of all Israeli hostages and that it was also time to silence the guns, stop the suffering that had engulfed the region, time for peace, international law and justice. Guterres added that the UN was fully committed to achieving those goals and that in the midst of so much bloodshed and division, the world must hold on to hope.
Recapping the top story with news just in, there's been another mass shooting incident in the Eastern Cape. SABC News has received information that 6 people have been gunned down in Godini village near Kumbu. For SAFM News, I am Anne Musa.
And that's the news for this hour. Theft, accident and 1 million rand liability cover, all covered by Outsurance Essential. Get a quote today, SMS CAR to 43187. What's the hype about Outsurance Essential and how is it different to any other car insurance out there? Outsurance Essential is specifically designed and priced for older cars. After an accident, claims are paid in cash so you can choose the panel beater you want to use. And now Outsurance also offers motor warranty for mechanical and electrical breakdowns. Get saving with Outsurance Essential for unfinanced cars older than 5 years and valued at less than 130,000 rand. SMS CAR to 43187. That's CAR to 43187 today. Licensed insurer and FSP. T's, C's and information online.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good morning. Very heavy delays on a couple of routes around the Gauteng area. One is the N1 North to Pretoria, crash at Boerta Avenue. That traffic's back through Brockfontein and halfway back the N14 Krugersdorp Highway towards the R55. Pretoria West exit. Big traffic through Midrand as well. A crash at Buccleuch interchange, and that's causing a pushback all the way through to Samrand. That is real heavy. And the other issue this morning's been this collision taking a while to clear up at Galuli. So N3 North stays really heavy from sort of Rand Airport interchange in Germiston, from Fort Trekker Road in Alberton all the way through past Cement Factory up through Van Buren and into Galilees. Behind that, the N12 and R24 is coming in from Ekurhuleni are really heavy as well. In fact, the N12 queuing from sort of Snake Road territory through towards the R21 Rondebolt exit, and then from there you stay in queues all the way through to Galilees. There's a couple of options that are worth avoiding this morning. Certainly any route going in from the east or coming up from the south into Galilees. Durban's N2 staying busy this hour with queues up through the M7 up towards Westwood Mall. More queues as you route between Komashu and Gateway as well. Stellenbosch approaches very heavy as we go back to work back to school, I guess, in that area as well in terms of university. And the Marine Drive, that's been very slow this morning. Traffic still under pressure from Sunningdale all the way through almost to Racecourse Road in the Milnerton area. More queues, Milnerton through to Parton Island. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
In sports this hour, Proteas women look to continue winning momentum, and we hear from Hugo Bruce, who says that he's still waiting on meeting with PSL coaches. More details at 8:30.
The Morning Brief with Thulasizwe Simelane. Weekdays, Monday to Friday, 6 to 9 a.m. The Morning Brief with Thulasizwe Simelane. Weekdays, Monday to Friday, 6 to 9 a.m.
And we are into the third hour of the morning brief on this Monday. Good morning, South Africa. It's good to have you with us. Well, a few days ago, about a week and a half ago, when we were talking about the massacre that occurred in the Eastern Cape, you remember how we were all saying we wish it was the last one that we would have to talk about and analyze and engage in paralysis by analysis, really, just looking for the underlying reasons and the causes and the plans of action. Well, we are back to that again. You're seeing on your screens this morning on SABC News, but also you heard from N. Musa reports of another mass shooting, this time in the area of Umbu in the Eastern Cape, at a place called Godini Village. 6 people gunned down, and once again we are back here to this issue, as I said, where you have this outrage that pours out and commitments by government. We will do something, we will deal with it. Here we are. Who is going to rescue us? Is anyone coming to rescue us from the scourge of crime that is simply unbearable in South Africa? Senzeni na. All right, we will update you as far as we can on that, but also you can weigh in on that. But also the other conversations we've been having all morning, reflecting on a year since the October the 7th attacks by Hamas into Israel and the subsequent war that was then launched by Israel in Palestine and the attendant consequences of that war. You can weigh in on that. In fact, I will take your calls in the next few minutes. We also spoke a little bit about COSATU's National Day of Action, saying that they are calling on workers to take a stand against the country's crippling economic crisis, particularly issues to do with retrenchments as well as the high cost of living in the country. You may want to weigh in on that. I'll take all of your calls and your WhatsApp voice notes, and the number to dial is 086 000 2032 and your WhatsApp voice notes on 061 410 4107. The third hour of the morning brief starts now.
Call Thulasizwe now, 086 000 2032.
All right, let's take your calls at this moment. Let me start with is it Ali? AB in Durban. Good morning to you, AB. You want to talk about Professor Thomas Hausen that I spoke to a bit earlier on?
Yes, indeed. You know, I'm always amazed and also amused whenever I hear this fellow Thomas Hausen with his verbal gymnastics and serious attempt to put lipstick on a pig. You know, I laughed out loudly when he said that perhaps many of the 42,000 people killed by Israel in Gaza died of natural causes. That not only takes the cake, but in fact the whole bakery. And I'm glad you challenged him on it. But on a serious note, the parallels between apartheid South Africa and apartheid Israel are quite remarkable. Just as white people came to South Africa and took over the place with violence and maintained apartheid with violence, so also white people came from Europe and took over Palestine with violence, which continues to this day. You know, it is a universal right that people who are oppressed have a right to resist oppression and occupation. When the ANC and others resisted, they were called terrorists, just as when the Palestinian groups like Hamas are also called terrorists. Thomas Hausen sounds no different from Pig Botha. The war on the Palestinians didn't start on October 7th. It started 75 years ago when whites came to Palestine with guns. Thomas Hausen is a clown, very entertaining indeed. He actually thinks that South Africans are ignorant and stupid.
All right, let's leave it there, AB. I'm afraid I'm restrained by the courtesy of, we invited him. So therefore, all I could do was really push back and challenge him during the interview. I'm unable to then, after the interview, add to what you have to say. That's AB there weighing in on the interview we had earlier on with Professor Thomas Hausen. Let's speak to, let's stay on the theme that's related to the 7th of October in Palestine and speak to KG in Bloemfontein. KG, good morning.
Thank you so much, Claus, for taking my call.
Sure.
I think that person must have said in advance that he is not an analyst. He's a spokesperson. I don't know of the Israeli Defense Forces or the Knesset or whatever the case might be. But it is actually, it would be funny if you're not so tragic. The fact that the 42 or so thousand people that died in that conflict, I mean, in his eyes, effectively, they mean absolutely nothing. And I personally, I think somebody needs to come to explain to us, or at least to me personally, why is it that when we are speaking about the lives of Palestinians, we speak to them in a by the way term, but when we come to the Israelis, it's like it's a big deal. For example, he referred to the hostages who were not released. 42,000 people would not have died, and those hostages to him they mean a lot. They mean a world to him.
Yeah.
So it's very scary to say those people are not seen as human beings like the rest of us. They are seen as something else. I don't know why is that, but it's very tragic.
No, I hear you, KG, and I did battle with the idea that the balance of probabilities in a situation where bombs are falling favors that, when we say you were killed by those bombs until it's proven otherwise, it favors that's the likely cause, especially where people are said to have died of injuries that are tabulated by various agencies. But as I say, it is difficult for me now to prosecute the case after I've actually let go of Professor Thomas Hausen. That would not be fair on him because I had him on air and we spoke to him a bit earlier on. Let's shift a little bit and talk about the Dr. John Hlophe, Mboneni in Ennerdale. You want to talk about Dr. John Hlophe. Good morning to you.
A very good morning to us and a very good morning to SA listeners and a good show as usual.
Thank you.
I just need to talk about the issue of Judge Hlophe, which
he doesn't want to be called Judge Hlophe. No, it's Dr. Hlophe. He insists that don't call me Judge.
Thank you. Absolutely true. And thank you for the correction.
Sure.
Yeah, so as on the 21st of Feb 2024, we are aware as citizens that he was accused of improper interference of the Constitutional Justice Court in litigation involving the interests of the former President of African National Congress and the former President of the Republic of South Africa, Jacob Zuma. However, during his impeachment, the fundamental core was the fact that he has been found guilty of gross misconduct. But, Thulas, I want to ask South Africa, during his impeachment, nothing has been said about what he should not do after he's been impeached, because nothing has been said. He should not be anywhere to do anything that is concerned the justice law or the constitutional court law. But now we see him being denied access and his rights has been violated. However, I will give a reference to this because if he was a teacher and he was found guilty of misconduct, whether he's in love with the child in the school or whatsoever, they will take his case not to practice or to do work as a teacher. But in terms of the law, we have never had anything concerning that. We'll give example again in the accountant law.
Right.
In the accountant, when you are found guilty of fraud, they take your license, which is called SACA, South African Institute for Counsel for Chartered Accountant, and you will never work again with money. But in this matter, nothing has been said.
So there are those, sorry Mboneni, if I can jump in there before I let you go. There are those positions where the law and the constitution are clear that once a person has been impeached, you cannot hold public office again, public office. But I suppose this is one of those where it wasn't specified. I haven't checked, to be quite honest with you, but I believe that's one of those where there's no specification that he cannot hold public office after that. It's is slightly different from the position with the president. For example, if a president were impeached, my understanding is that that person would not be able to hold public office again.
Yeah, but before I leave Thulas, and thank you very much for that. However, if you can call Adrian St-Pierre at the beginning of the year this year, he called one of the experts, who's an expert in law, who has stated clearly, you can play that clip in 4 or 5 news, which was saying that Judge Klope will never be in the court of law as a judge, or as a magistrate, but he can do and represent anyone who is a client. Right. However, this was not done. So we found that there's a war between himself and Breitenberg, because if you go to his...
Mbonini, I've got to move on. Thank you so much, Mbonini, out in Ennerdale. They're talking about Dr. John Hlophe and the implications of his impeachment. Begin, Mpumalanga, you also want to talk about the JSC. Good morning to you.
When I was saying,
hey, Babe. Thank you.
What I'd love to say, my brother, is that, it's so disheartening to see the way our government is being run. There is the so-called the separation of powers in law. And if there is a social separation of powers, one must have to understand as to whenever maybe Parliament has made a certain decision, what needs to be done, and the judiciary has to act independently and has to be very punctual in whatever that is being done. With regards to Dr. John Hlophe, I want to state it very clean and clear, without any fear of contradiction, that our government is run by the DA. Whatever the DA is saying, the courts are jumping and those things are happening. Excuse me. When you look at this issue more of Dr. Hlophe, I believe that those in authorities have never seen it coming. Why? Because former President Jacob Zuma has been working underground, and working so underground, he knew all the weak points of our government. He knew the African National Congress like a palm of his hand, because he has been in charge of the underground movement. And strategically, they placed Dr. Hlophe, who is competent, who is also a threat to the current government, who's also a threat even to the DA. I believe that is why, at the end of the day, Dr. Hlophe has been done to what.
All right, Biggie. Let's leave it there. The only thing I can add to that, though, Biggie, is that the supremacy of the Constitution is one of those. It's difficult, man, to navigate. Sometimes it favors you, sometimes it doesn't, and some of the decisions can be cause a great deal of pain. And as far as the Hlophe matter is concerned, my understanding of what the full judgment said is that this was a discretion and a decision to be exercised by the National Assembly. So it's directed at that. There are always those technicalities that are sometimes, they sometimes can raise a lot of debates, but it's a product of the supremacy of our Constitution. Mike in Newlands, good morning to you. You want to talk about Israel and Palestine?
Yeah, good morning to the Thulasizwe. I do. Look, I'm certainly not schooled in these matters, and I look to your shows and others to educate me as to what's going on, but I'm not getting answers to what, to my mind, are just very simple questions. This terrible war where children, women, children, men are dying on both sides could be stopped tomorrow. Not if Israel releases all the prisoners, because Hamas has not said they're going to carry on holding the hostages, or if Israel was to stop fighting for their protection, would Hamas stop firing the rockets? The ball is in Hamas's court. If Hamas releases the hostages, the war will stop. If Hamas stops firing rockets into Israel, the war will stop. A very simple question is, why does Hamas not do that? Because it's about children, it's about men, it's about women. I don't want to hear about Israel and their hostages and their prisoners and all that stuff. I just want to know, Israel has said they will stop the war the moment the hostages are released.
But that would suggest, Mike, suggest that Israel would need to back away from this idea of completely annihilating Hamas. So if we go with your example and Hamas were to release all the hostages, but Hamas continues to exist, and therefore Israel says for as long as they exist, we must keep fighting till we annihilate them. So objectively, right now, it would not stop the war, even if all the hostages were released, because Hamas would still exist.
to the Susie now, I disagree with that completely. We need to put pressure on Israel. Imagine what would happen if Israel carried on fighting after the hostages were released and the rockets stopped firing to Israel. Imagine, Israel would never be able to continue to go to war. They would be blacklisted by America and all the Western countries. That's not a fact.
All right.
The fact that is that it's up to the hostages, and this war, in my simple, humble opinion, I can't figure it out, but it seems to me that the Hamas want this war to continue.
All right, Mike, let's leave it there. That's Mike in Newlands there weighing in on the situation in the Middle East.
The Stallions get it that the only way to remain on top of Group L is through a win. However, the Swallows refuse to be left behind. They target a second victory to move away from the third position. This is the Total Energies AFCON 2025 qualifier. Experience the journey to Morocco, Burkina Faso versus Burundi on Thursday, 10 October at 9 p.m. Live everywhere for everyone, always on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
The only talk radio morning breakfast show that makes sense. The Morning Brief with Thulasizwe Simelane.
All right, let's focus on this now. The Department of Water and Sanitation has officially launched the Vaal River Anti-Pollution Forum. The forum aims to bring together government departments, industries and communities to identify and address pollution sources within the river. It aims to coordinate efforts by experts and activists to tackle long-standing pollution issues plaguing the Vaal River. For more on that, I'm joined by Dr. Ferial Adam, the Executive Manager of WaterCan. Good morning to you, Dr. Adam. We had this conversation with the Deputy Minister Thulasizwe Simelane about a week ago. Just tell me your understanding of the extent of the problem that is at hand, that this forum now seeks to address pollution along the Vaal River and its catchment areas.
Good morning to you and your listeners. Yeah, I mean, I think that if we know about the Vaal, we know that we're dealing with years of pollution. A lot of it is sewage, but there's also agricultural pollution, chemical pollution, etc. So having a focus on the pollution on the Vaal River is important, because as you saw with things like water letters, and if you look at the Hartbeespoort Dam with hyacinth, the pollution does then create other issues within the river ecosystem, and that needs to be monitored. So I think that is important. I think that a group specifically looking on the pollution is important, but there are some concerns around the committee that's been set up.
What are those concerns?
Well, for years, I'm not sure if you know, but there's been a catchment management forum. And government, has set up these catchment management forums across the country. So if you look, there's quite a few that exist. And there was one of the most active ones was the Vaal Catchment Management Forum. But it doesn't seem as if the catchment management forum, people in the catchment management forum, have been included in the Vaal River pollution monitoring. So why are they, this is going to just create duplication. So why are those two bodies not talking to each other? And that is something that is a bit of a concern. And some of the groups and civil society groups that have been involved have raised that as well.
So is it your sense that this would be a parallel structure to the Vaal Catchment Management Forum, or this new forum that is now in place?
Well, that's what I'm seeing, because they haven't even invited the Catchment Management Forum to the river pollution body. So it just makes sense for me to consolidate and that everyone starts talking and dealing with the issue together.
Yeah. But as far as this new forum now is concerned, that government is championing and also has a dedicated Deputy Minister, Thulasizwe Simelane. From your understanding of its composition and competencies within its composition, is it likely to be adequate in leading the response to pollution on the Vaal?
I think it would be, I think that having any kind of structure that can focus on pollution is very important, given the state of our rivers in the country and given the importance of the Vaal. So I think, yes, that is important, and that is something that we need to actually celebrate. But I think that sometimes when government gets too excited to do something and the powers that play in terms of the influence, they're not listening to other groups, and that will create a problem. But I think that in the whole of looking at pollution, yes, I think it's a good step.
And in terms of tangible action in reversing some of the effects of pollution, you mentioned hyacinth, and that was a particular problem at Harties, and my goodness, it was ugly. And you see it from time to time. I think even in the Vaal it's been reported, but also the issue of sewage management with municipalities, some of them being dysfunctional along the area of the Vaal catchment area. Are you seeing anything tangible in the last few months? It doesn't have to be the full solution, the whole solution, but are you seeing anything by way of some solution being implemented?
Look, I think that the issues and the challenges in the Vaal is you have to deal with the source of the pollution, and I'm finding very slow movement on that. I think when we look at the issue of the water letters, that was because of a lot of pressure from the groups and the communities that stay around the Vaal that actually put that pressure on government to clean it up and to get involved in the cleaning up. So whether that was just a superficial kind of cleanup and they needed to do it, I'm not sure. But I think that there's a lot more work on the Vaal that still needs to be done. And that we how do I say this? We can't look at just the water letters and what has happened with the water letters and say that that is a good thing, but the source of the issues are still spewing pollution into the rivers. Also, just one more thing. I think that we're all very concerned about the pollution of sewage, and rightfully so. But we need to start, as government needs to start testing for other things, because, with this, there's a whole range of other issues that we need to be concerned with.
Agricultural chemicals and the likes. Thank you for that. That's Dr. Ferial Adam, the Executive Manager of WaterCan, talking to us about efforts to roll back pollution along the Vaal River catchment area. Let's take you to Ann Musa now with the latest news headlines update.
Good morning. Thanks to us in the headlines. SABC News has received information on another mass shooting incident in the Eastern Cape. 6 people have been gunned down in Godini village near Qumbu. COSATU has called on non-essential workers to turn out in their numbers to support its National Day of Action against the country's crippling economic crisis. And the Judicial Service Commission will today begin with interviews to fill vacancies in various courts across the country. I'll have details on these and other stories at 9.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Well, still very heavy into Galulis this morning. An earlier crash is being cleared, but there's now a breakdown around Van Buren. So that big backlog coming through from Elands up into Galuli, still there, and then queues through right through to Modderfontein. So Elands interchange to deep, sort of into Edenvale, Alex territory is the delay on the N3. Behind that, the N12 and R24 routes are super heavily backed up from Ekurhuleni coming into Galulis as well. We've also got collision on the M1 North up by the Boertha Avenue exit, and that's a very heavy backlog from Brockfontein. So if you're heading up the N1 through Midrand Centurion, you want to turn onto that Polokwane section, maybe just take the N14 and off-ramp at Jean Avenue for some alternative routes. Also crashed before Stormful Road on the N1 South, causing a backlog coming through from Montana. Durban bound off a Munsum Toti, a crash there just past Moskolnik near Galleria, so the N2 leaving the South Coast stays under pressure. Cape Town, a lot of traffic on the M1 today, still very busy from Plattekloof Hill right through towards the city centre area. Marine Drive still super busy. Looks a bit different this morning. Queues from Sunningdale all the way down to the first lights at Sunset Beach. And the M5's worth a mention. It's still really badly backed up from Kenilworth side all the way through the N2 up through the Black River Parkway into that congestion on the N1 inbound carriageway. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
This is SAFM Sports with Tumi Nkapele.
Good morning once again, Dumi. So I see that the Proteas women are back in action, in the T20 World Cup.
Absolutely, and they head into that second Women's T20 World Cup match against England today, high on confidence after their commanding 10-wicket win over the West Indies in their opening fixture. Proteas women's spinner Nonkululeko Mlaba has attributed their remarkable start to the team's strong mentality.
I think for us now, we're in it to win it. I mean, we failed semi-finals a couple of times, and we failed at the finals, and now it's either we win it or not. So that's the mentality of the team now. We're just in it to win it. Yeah.
Well, hopefully they'll be able to lift the trophy eventually. But still staying with cricket, the Proteas men's side of things are also in action today. And Captain Themba Bavuma has been ruled out of the third ODI against Ireland due to a soft tissue injury on his left elbow. The 34-year-old sustained the injury during the second ODI on Friday and will return home with the rest of the squad tomorrow and consult as specialist. Rassie van der Dussen will captain the team for that final match of that series today. In football, Bafana coach Hugo Bruce says that he hasn't given up on a sit down with all of his PSL top flight counterparts to discuss the national team. It's not for the first time the Belgian mentor brings this up, but yet there's still appears that there's no cooperation in arranging this meeting, and Bruce has been looking to meet with these local coaches since his appointment as Bafana coach in May 2021. However, he says that he's still waiting to have this meeting, as it will be important, especially with everyone working with him with regards to the national team. Then for the first time in 4 years, Amajita have lifted the COSAFA Under-20 Championship, finishing the tournament unbeaten and keeping a clean sheet in 5 matches. South Africa beat Zambia 2-0 in the final with goals from Chandra Campbell and tournament top goal scorer Lee Ashen. Now the two teams have also qualified for the AFCON Under-20, which will be held next year. Elsewhere, Tottenham Hotspur manager Ange Postecoglou has called his side's collapse against Brighton in the Premier League probably the worst defeat since he's been at the club. Spurs were 2-0 up after 37 minutes and heading for their 6th successive win in all competitions, but conceded 3 times in the second half as Brighton took the 3 points. Meanwhile, Manchester United played to a goalless draw against Aston Villa, and Chelsea settled for spoils with Nottingham Forest in a 1-1 draw affair. Then in rugby, Bulls coach Jake White has indicated that he will increasingly use Springbok utility back Kenan Moody at centre in the season's United Rugby Championship and Champions Cup. In the Springbok setup, competition is quite fierce among outside backs, with coach Rassie Erasmus having a pool of players like Kurtley Arendse, Apalele Fassi, Cheslin Colby, Willie Leroux and Makazola Mabimpi to choose from. And among the centres, Erasmus has talented and experienced campaigners like Lucanio Am, Damian Dialendi, Andre Esterhazen and Jesse Creel in his selection pool. Then in tennis, Carlos Alcaraz and Yannick Sinner came through tough tests at the Shanghai Masters to reach the last 16. Sinner recovered from a set down to beat Thomas Martin 6-7, 6-4 and 6-2, while Alcaraz claimed a 7-6 and 6-3 win over Yebing Wang. Sinner held his serve in an 11-minute 6 game to go 4-2 up in the deciding set of his match before winning the next 2 games to close out the win in 2 hours and 38 minutes. With that said, it is a wrap from my side. I'll have more on other sports this afternoon.
The Business Update on SAFM.
Let's bring in Dowling Lechela for that. And Dowling, even though many people will say we can't feel it just yet, you are going to tell us that the prices of stable foods, staples, certain staples, is actually stabilizing.
That's right. Now, and at that point, I want to just touch on the surface how things may seem good, like the news is good, but economists have warned that despite the decrease in food inflation, this offers little respite to cash-strapped South Africans at the lower end of the market, as their wages have not kept pace with soaring prices over the past 2 years. And zooming in on that household affordability index compiled by advocacy group Pietermaritzburg Economic Justice and Dignity, research revealed that 8 of the 17 food products prioritized by households were cheaper in September than a year ago. This includes cake flour, samp, cooking oil, salt, onions, frozen chicken pieces, stock cubes, and white bread. Onions saw a big decrease last month. The 10 kg bag now costs just over 100 Rand, which is 52 Rand cheaper than before, reflecting a 34% decline. Other staple foods also became more affordable. For example, a 10 kg pack of frozen chicken pieces, a popular protein source for many South Africans, fell by 2% to just over 381 Rand. Now, despite some price drops, many everyday essentials continue to get expensive. 9 out of the 17 key items surveyed are still rising in price. Staples such as maize meal, rice, sugar beans have seen significant increases. Maize meal is up 3% to 318 Rand for a 30 kg bag, while rice has risen 10% to 174 Rand for 10 kgs. Sugar beans have experienced the biggest jump, surging 30% to 229 Rand for a 5 kg pack. So a pretty mixed bag of news there.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, the context today is the march and the strike by COSATU about the rising cost of living, and it brings in that factor of incomes not having kept a pace. Ndauling, AutoZone is one of those brands that are easily recognizable. I see that the process to get a buyer and get it sold is forging ahead.
That's right. So AutoZone has been offered a lifeline. That's as battery and automotive components manufacturer Mete has agreed to pay 290 million rands to acquire the company. Now, AutoZone is the largest privately held retailer of automotive parts in the country, has been under financial strain following entering business rescue proceedings in June. The group has been operating under terms of its business rescue plan. Now, the deal was made through partnerships with TP Hentech and AutoZone's business rescue practitioners, and through the deal, Mete aims to bolster its automotive aftermarket business. As part of the transaction, Mete or its subsidiary will provide financing to AutoZone to settle outstanding creditor claims and cover specific working capital needs, ensuring a stable transition and growth prospects for the combined entity. Now, this move is set to expand Mete's presence in the automotive aftermarket sector. Last month, Mete announced that it's selling its Turkish unit with plans to use the proceeds from the sale to boost local operations and look for growth and expansion opportunities into the rest of sub-Saharan Africa. And so this deal aligns with its plans to expand its business in the mobility industry. It gives Mete a strong distribution network, allowing it to grow its existing automotive parts businesses in South Africa.
What about 19 minutes to go? What kind of a trading day can we expect in the markets?
So local markets are likely to start the week on an upbeat note following international peers. In terms of local news, traders will be waking up to news from Richmond. The group has announced plans to sell its online retail platform, Yux Net-a-Porter. And then there are trading updates from property company Cirrus Real Estate and tech company Tech. So lots to chew on when markets open. Meanwhile, in the currency scene, the rand weakening following dollar strength. The greenback has managed to rise for the 5th consecutive day. On Friday, the local unit sitting at 17.46 to the dollar at the moment. In Wall Street, futures struggling for direction, pretty flat there. This ahead of the US CPI print. This print expected to move the needle a bit, especially when it comes to sentiment around riskier assets. Over in Asia, the rally there cooling off. We are seeing a bit of a pullback. Markets are still in the green though, just not as high as they were about an hour ago. Those stocks are on track to end the day in the green.
All right, thank you for that. Have yourself a great day there. That is Ndauling Lechela. She's been watching all things to do with the economy, business and the markets for you throughout the morning here on The Morning Brief.
You are listening to The Morning Brief with Thulasizwe Simelane.
Right, let's go to this story now. The Psychological Society of South Africa is set to host its 30th anniversary this week. At the ceremony, the 4th Steve Biko Frantz Fanon Award for Psychological Liberation will be awarded to the legal team that presented South Africa's case at the International Court of Justice, that's the ICJ, at The Hague in January this year. The award is in recognition of what the society calls extraordinary steps towards dismantling the empire that the South African legal team endeavored on. For more on this, I'm joined by Dr. Sads Cooper, the Pan-African Psychology Union President. Good morning to you, Dr. Cooper, once again. So the people you will be, let's start with the Steve Biko Frantz Fanon Award, then we can delve into the rest of the program. You are awarding these 4 advocates, these 4 legal representatives. Why do they represent this concept of taking extraordinary steps towards dismantling empire?
Well, this award is given every few years. The first one was given to Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and then the second was given posthumously as the Steve Biko Award for Psychological Liberation to Frantz Fanon. And thereafter, it's been called the Biko Fanon Award. The reason is that in the 30th year of our democracy, we have had to stand up internationally on the principles which created this democracy and which fended off that dehumanization of our past. And it was unanimously felt by the Steve Biko Foundation, the Frantz Fanon Foundation, the Pan-African Psychology Union, and the Psychology Society of South Africa, that we should honor these advocates who represented the case so remarkably. And it caught the attention not only of South Africa, but the continent and the world in the clarity with which they presented their arguments to enable the people in Palestine to have a restoration of their human dignity and the right to live and survive. So this, as Fanon said, every time a man has made the dignity of the spirit triumph, every time a man has said no to an attempt to enslave his fellow man, I have felt solidarity with his act. So in a sense, both the teachings of Fanon and Biko talk of this kind of humanism, a shared humanism, because we are one human race. Our biology is the same. And if we are seeing the kind of unremitting dehumanization, the destruction of life of tens of thousands of people without such intervention, then we go back to a state of barbarity where might kills overright. And this is the basis of what we felt we should honor.
Sure. So if someone were to ask what the link is between your core mandate, which has to do with the psychological well-being of South Africans, of Africans, with the work that these advocates, sterling as it is, advocates Max du Plessis, Adila Hassim, Thembeka Ngcukaitobi, and Professor John Dugat, what would you say? What does the link come in between the work around self-actualization, consciousness of oneself and the environment, and psychological integrity, and global events such as the ones that into which this team was wading?
Well, we should remember that the Psychological Society was formed 30 years ago in January 1994, before the advent of democracy. And therefore, we in our constitution speak to the issues about ensuring that our society remains open. It advances not only the issues of our science and profession and a means of promoting well-being, but also actively strives for social justice, opposes any policy here or anywhere else that deny individuals access to material and physical, psychological conditions for optimal human development. And we protest against, and this is in our constitution, protest against any violations of basic human rights. So this is within our remit, and importantly, there isn't an area of human endeavor that psychology doesn't traipse. You can deal with machines, you can in your studio, elsewhere. Psychology, the science of behavior, underpins that. And when we see these unremitting, real-time destructions on online, in the media, and so on, it does something to the psyche. It does make our children especially feel that this is normal behavior, whereas it is totally, grossly abnormal and needs to be stopped for the sake not only of the Palestinians, but all of us, because there, but for the grace of, go us.
So lastly then, Dr. Cooper, your overall reflections on the 30th anniversary of the Psychological Society of South Africa. What have been the highlights for you and perhaps some of the lowlights?
Well, the highlights are that we're the first professional and learned society that created a non-racial coming together. Previously, it was various groupings representing largely racial, so-called racial interests, but we've united around that. We still have issues because those who feel that Thulas has taken his job and why should Satscoop be in this profession have broken away, but they're a minority. By far, the society enjoys the respect of psychologists throughout the country. It stands on principle. It does not promote any narrow political agenda or party, is not partisan. It recognizes that people have their own beliefs. And celebrating 30 years, despite all that has happened, and continuing to provide underpinnings for interventions in our society is something to be crowed about, and it coincides with the 10th anniversary of the Pan-African Psychology Union. So it's a double celebration, if you like.
All right, I've got to thank you for your time. That's Dr. Thulasizwe Cooper, the Pan-African Psychology Union President, talking about the Psychological Society of South Africa's 30th anniversary, as well as the bestowing of the Steve Biko Frantz Fanon Award on the team that presented South Africa's case at the ICJ at the beginning of this year.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Been a busy Monday. Let's recap on some of the ones to try and avoid if you possibly can. Coming from Montana in Pretoria, heading south, an earlier crash between Stormful Road and the N4 Emelachlanni Highway. Still badly backing up traffic from that Sefako Makato exit. The N3 crash at Galuli's is cleared. There is some traffic that remains heavy from Galuli's through to Edenvale up until Modderfontein Road. Durban, the M13 leading Pinetown through towards the N3 Paradise Valley, still very busy. And Cape Town, we've been keeping an eye on Marine Drive this morning. It is starting to ease, but down to Sunset Beach stays busy, and plenty of traffic on the N2 between the airport and Hospital Bend. Behind that, the M5 queuing back as far as about the Kromboom Road exit. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
We definitely know what good insurance is. Our insurance don't delay when it comes to any claims. If something happens to one of our vehicles on the road, service delivery is the main thing.
They make sure that you are a satisfied customer from the beginning to the end.
It's definitely a win-win with our insurance.
Switch to Business Outsurance today and you could get a massive 20% discount on your business insurance premium. SMS quote to 43328. That's quote to 43328 to switch and save today. Licensed insurer and FSP. TCs and information online.
EFC 118 promises to be one of the most scintillating fight nights in recent memory, with two standout matchups. Fresh off his incredible run in The Ultimate Fighter, Rody Roots battles for the interim featherweight strap against deadly kickboxing specialist Ayanda Zwane, whilst the co-main event witnesses the return of the one and only Martin the Punisher Van Staden, who takes on fellow veteran Hanru the Bully Boda. EFC 118 from the World Sports Betting Arena. Watch it on SABC Sport Channel on DTT Channel 4 from 7 p.m. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
Call Thulasizwe now. 086 000 2032.
All right, let's lead the conversation together in the last few minutes that are remaining. Let me take some of your calls at the moment. Let me speak to Bongani, who is out in Durban. Bongani, you want to talk to me about human rights this morning? All right, hold on a second, Bongani, while we get you up. All right, Bongani, you want to talk to me about human rights?
Yes. You know, thinking about the situation in the Middle East, well, in Palestine now, joining in Lebanon, does this not show us the status of our standing? Not really us, the world, especially the West, and then bringing in the Arab League as well, and on human rights. That we thought we moved. We saw Rwanda. We thought Rwanda was a mistake. Now, it's kind of showing that this issue of human rights, it's human rights for convenience when it comes to the West. It cannot be that what has happened in Gaza and now starting to happen in Lebanon carries on unchecked as it is.
Yeah. No, I hear you, Bongan. You will have seen, of course, that a few Western nations are starting to show concern, France being the latest, about weapons being supplied to Israel, being used in Gaza. You will have heard that conversation. The UK also suspended some of their weapons exports licenses. Are you not? Do you still hold to your view that it's human rights for convenience as far as the West is concerned?
There are two things there. There are two things there. The first one is that when their interests start to get affected, then they start to say something. They seem to be saying something. That's the first one. And then secondly, when they say interest, like economic and so on and so on. Also, when at home, more and more people are starting to raise their voices. They start to seem to be saying something.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
I hear you. Thank you for that. That's Bongani in Durban talking about the issue of human rights, just the global scheme of the human rights architecture of the world and the moral positioning of various countries. Let's take a listen to one or two of your voice notes now.
Good morning, Thulasizwe. This is GS Mospacing. So, Thulasizwe, I just want to get this thing clear. So, in this Eastern Cape, people just wake up and decide to go randomly kill people in large numbers, just like that. So much just like that. Yeah, and when we people on the ground cry for the government to bring back the death sentence, we are taken for granted. Can't they, whose lives have got rights and who doesn't have rights? Yeah. Thank you, GS More Spacing.
Oh, GS More Spacing. I like that name. GS, I don't know. You don't want to say if only it was just in the Eastern Cape, because that would be minimizing it. But the point I'm making is that right now the incidents are happening in the Eastern Cape, but you and I know that it can easily be in Gauteng the very next week or in KwaZulu-Natal the week after. We just need to deal with this problem and deal with it comprehensively and decisively before we become one of those quote-unquote hot mess countries that, where people just die in large numbers at the barrel of a gun. Let me take a
Good
call.
Morning.
Yeah.
Tulas, Vincent Rismati, immigrant. Tulas, I'm appalled by the views of the professor that you interviewed there. I think it's quite extreme, and I don't think he's in his right mind. All the things that he said about Iran extinction and the people in the Middle East dying of natural causes, I think it's out of order, really. I'm so disturbed. I don't know how you feel, but personally, I'm not at peace with his views. Vincent here, immigrant. Thank you, Tlas.
All right, Vincent, I've heard you, and I think many people have shared the sentiment that you shared this morning. As I said, I did what I could while I had him on the line, but it would be unfair of me to hold a firm and a strong position and suddenly share my outrage and whatever feelings I may have about his sentiments post the interview. It would just not tally well, but you are well within your rights to raise those issues. Let's take a call from Janusz. Janusz in Cape Town. Janusz, good morning to you. You want to talk about selective democracy. What exactly is that you are referring to?
Hi, good morning to you.
Yeah.
Selective democracy, especially promoted by the A, because Democrats Democratic Party or Democratic Alliance, they promote to the name. There's a democracy, so Democratic Party. So I hope that they're gonna be democratic. But especially in the Western Cape, if you go to for instance, municipality in Cape Town, you don't hardly see any white person employed by the municipality. When I came from Transvaal, I was for a few years working in municipality electrical department, and we had about 1/3 white, blacks, and colors. Today, you don't see any white electrician or inspector, and this is controlled by the Democratic Alliance. So there is no democracy. Last 10 years, we lost about 1 million of white people who were working in South Africa. We lost them. They could provide to the taxes, only to the taxes, enough money to support this government, 380 payment. But not, we lost them only the last 10 years. So the DA shouldn't. And also when we come to the election, DA promised us that we're going to have a special unit, police unit for fighting the gangsterism. They give up this idea and they say, no, the police, it was before. So they are not democratic. I'm very upset with them because they are lying to us.
All right, I hear you, Janusz, there. That's Janusz in Cape Town expressing dissatisfaction with the Democratic Alliance in particular and what he sees as a gulf between the promises before the elections and what is eventually delivered after the elections. And that's how we come to the end of the Monday edition of the Morning Brief here on SAFM. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening, and thanks to the team that put it all together. The Talking Point is up next here on SAFM after the news. Essential cover from Outsurance pays out claims in cash, allowing you to choose your own panel beater. SMS CAR to 43187 now.
In our top stories, 6 people killed in a mass shooting incident in the Eastern Cape, and JSC interviews to fill vacancies across the country to take place. Good morning. SABC News has received information on another mass shooting incident in the Eastern Cape. 6 people have been gunned down in Godini village near Kumbu. The deceased are reported to be members of a community policing forum. The latest shooting comes a week after 18 people were gunned down in Ongubazana village. 3 suspects have been arrested in connection with other crimes and are persons of interest in the 18 murders. COSATU has called on non-essential workers to turn out in their numbers to support its National Day of Action against the country's crippling economic crisis. It's demanding a moratorium on retrenchments. It follows large-scale retrenchments at the South African Post Office and metals group Sibanye-Stillwater this year. COSATU's parliamentary coordinator Matthew Parks says the aim of the nationwide strike is to compel government and business to address the current challenges.
Business can later along all the likes about certificates, because business and government have failed to respond to the issues all these years. In fact, they're getting worse. So we'll continue to raise them until we see progress. The rights of workers to withdraw the labor, the right to strike is a fundamental constitutional right. We know business would love to see that right be taken away, but it is the way in democracy, and it is a way for workers to put pressure on government, on employers to say, look, we're sitting on an economic time bomb, we've got to address issues.
The Mpumalanga Education Department has assured parents and learners that the province's schools will be open today. This follows social media posts that trade union COSATU's nationwide strike would disrupt schooling across the province. Provincial education spokesperson Gerald Sambo says learners cannot afford to miss a single day of school as exams are fast approaching.
Not all educators are members of SATU, and what we're saying as the department is that employees have a right to protest. We just hope that our teachers understand how crucial this time of the year is and that the learners are preparing to go write exams.
The Judicial Service Commission will today begin with interviews to fill vacancies in various courts across the country. The Commission received the green light to proceed after the High Court in Johannesburg dismissed the Thulasizwe Party's application to have the sitting postponed. Zole Karkodashe reports.
The judgment of the Gauteng High Court in Johannesburg has cleared the way for the 2-week-long session to begin without Thulasizwe Party parliamentary leader Dr. John Hlophe, as per the order of the Western Cape High Court. The interviews will see over 50 candidates vie for positions in the judiciary. This week will see the JSC interviewing vacancies to fill, among others, 3 vacancies in the Supreme Court of Appeal, the Gauteng division, which has 6 vacancies and is the busiest division in the country, as well as the KZN division, which also has 6 vacancies and a vacant position for Deputy Judge President.
And finally, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been visiting troops in the north of the country as the army presses ahead with its offensive against both Hezbollah and Hamas. He says the realities of the region have been completely changed over the past 12 months, both in Lebanon and Gaza. Much of the leadership of Hezbollah in Lebanon has been targeted. During his visit to Lebanon, the UN refugee chief, Filippo Grandi, criticized the way Israel